Reborn in the empire where the sun never sets to become a pirate. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 501 Fafnir Hanji. Old friends reunited. A few months ago, Lorraine had made a special trip to visit Nelson, who was under house arrest, during the naval battle en route to Bastère. That meeting was anything but cordial. After all, whether sincere or feigned, Lorraine undoubtedly crossed the line of social distance. Collingwood, on the other hand, was even more so. Lorraine's last encounter with him dates back to Operation Reach the Sea. Collingwood had only accompanied the fleet during the outpost battle, returning to Kingston with the fleet after the landing. Thus, years had passed since they'd been apart. Time had inevitably fostered a rift between these three talented young men, a rift particularly pronounced between Lorraine and Collingwood. Fortunately, their friendship had been built around Nelson, and with Nelson moderating the mood, the atmosphere in the private room was reconciled in a few words. The situation on the sea shifted dramatically. Less than 800 meters away, the Special Forces formation suddenly unleashed its hidden fangs, aiming directly at the center of the First Fleet's battle formation, the fulcrum of the inverted V, the formation's flagship, the Mistral. The ships of the First Fleet were 150 meters apart, the Mary and the New Generation were 100 meters apart, and a lady was sandwiched between them. If the engagement continued at this pace, the Mistral would be pinned within a 50-meter radius by the three ships of the Special Forces' most powerful firepower, while her companions were scattered on either flank, putting at least half of the ships out of effective range. So, should they immediately converge on the center and force the Special Forces to turn by closing the gap? Fleet-to-fleet close combat primarily relied on maneuvering in short, close-range exchanges, a stark contrast to conventional battleships. While battle lines prioritize stability and fine-tuning, close combat relies on speed and coordination. Once the gaps were reduced, the First Fleet's movements would inevitably become clumsy, their ships unable to coordinate effectively. Whichever way the Special Forces' claws turned, they would be defenseless. No one expected that the prestigious and clearly superior First Fleet would find itself in such a precarious position from the outset. What would they do? Would they allow their flagship to face the danger, or abandon it to save the enemy and regroup? Hundreds of hearts hung in the balance, the tense atmosphere in the observation deck mirroring that of the Mistral. Distance 750-650, the distance between the two formations was rapidly closing, the advantage in the exercise rapidly shifting towards the Special Forces formation. Sailors frantically scurried across the Mistral's decks. The officers in charge suppressed their emotions, anxiously awaiting orders to adjust. But nothing came. The admiral of the first formation, Mistral's captain, Fafnir Hanji, lay motionless at the bow, her petite figure pressed against a massive writing board covered in charts. She held a quill saturated with red ink, unable to write a single stroke. She was clearly hesitant, and who knew how long this hesitation would last. Chenelly kicked the errand boy scurrying across the deck and ordered him to recheck the securing of the boxes and barrels near the midmast. He then took 2 steps at a time and strode up to the forecastle. "Admiral." Immediately, the powerful Anne blocked the entrance to the stairwell. Glaring down at him. "The Admiral is thinking." "Shut up." Chenelly's face darkened. "There's plenty of time for careful consideration. Right now, the priority is to avoid it and calm the crew's nervousness." "Nervous? Only you fools who don't trust the Admiral are nervous," Anne sneered. "Range reporting is ongoing. The veterans of the White Pelican know that if the Admiral hasn't given an order, it's not time yet." Range 550, a thunderous shout erupted from the platform below the foremast. Chenelly's muscles trembled with rage. "Isn't this the right time? We're almost in mortar range. When will it be the right time?" "Of course, Anne, Annie." The voice was light, the murmur of panting louder than her voice. Anne immediately abandoned Chinori and scurried over to Fafnir. "Fafnir, I'm here, range 400, formation 3, go around the rear." "Yes, Mistra." "Gray, Brunhild, hold still, to range 300, squad 5 tactics." Anne's eyes widened. Change formation at 300, Chinori's eyes widened. Yes, Fafnir huddled like a pitiful quail between the two muscular beasts. Mistra, half sail, Brunhild, full sail. Here, her pen traced a broken line across the sea not far in front of the Mistra. Here, the ridge. Range 400, order. Tactics number 3 on the left and right wings. The left wing, steer 15 degrees to port. The right wing, steer 15 degrees to starboard. Commander's order. White Pelican, command ship on the left wing. Merlin, command ship on the right wing. Execute. White Pelican, command received. Merlin, command received. Reformation commenced. Range 350. Enemy bowguns, harassing fire. The ladies' lower bowguns fired first. Two 18-pounder cannons roaring out shells, sending a huge splash across the sea 200 meters away from Mistra. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds, the first formation began to change formation. The 3 ships in the center remained in their original position, while the 6th-class ships on the left and right wings, under the command of the command ship, steered their rudders in unison. The formation blossomed like a flower. The ships, originally arranged in a ladder-like, diagonal line, converged into a single trajectory as they changed direction. With a commander at the head, they carved a smooth curve, circling behind the Special Forces formation. The exclamations from the observation deck intensified. The brief change of formation clearly demonstrated the first formation's unparalleled tactical prowess and their absolute obedience to the Admiral's orders. They had exploited the principles of lawfulness to the utmost, creating a breathtaking visual spectacle. It was as if a divine intervention had descended, using high-speed ships as brushes, painting the ocean's canvas with water lines. Collingwood leaped to his feet with a cry of astonishment, staring in astonishment at the remnants of water lines spreading outward across the surface. How long has this formation been formed? The first formation was the first of the direct fleet to form, but it wasn't until Mistral became their flagship and Hanji became its admiral that it was only 37 days ago, Laura explained. Katerina made great efforts to help Hanji control the formation. In order to support her captain, she was discharged from the hospital before her injuries were healed, and even though she is inseparable from a wheelchair, it is precisely because of the Vice Admiral's unremitting support that Hanji quickly established prestige in the formation. The training volume of the first formation this month is 2 days on and 1 day off, that is, 2 days at sea and 1 day in port. With this kind of training volume, it is natural for them to perform well in coordination. Nelson poked his head out from beside Collingwood. How's little Pierce's training, little Pierce? Lorraine pondered. The Special Service Fleet just returned from the West Asia expedition and is still in the acclimatization and rest phase. They have about 1 sea training session and 2 land training sessions every 10 days, 1 day each. Is your direct fleet really off-duty? Only basically off-duty, Lorraine said. Under normal circumstances, if the branch's escort force is insufficient, the direct fleet will still provide military support, but this period is special. The 1st and 2nd fleets are being reorganized due to the Battle of Bastère, while the Special Service Fleet is resting from the expedition. Production tasks are suspended, and daily training is maintained at the minimum standard. 2 days of work and 1 day of rest is the minimum standard. Oh, that's independent training. The Special Service Fleet's training intensity is the minimum standard. It sounds like there's a big difference in motivation between the two sides. Nelson pointed at the sea. While flanking is a good option, in a 3-on-3 head-on situation, the First Fleet's flagship is still. Nelson's words were suddenly cut off mid-sentence. He stared at the changes in the sea with wide eyes, his fingers reaching out from the box trembling uncontrollably. Oh my god, this change. Chapter 502 NSMK3. At the sea, the First Fleet's 2 wings spread out, and the 6th-class brigs and brigantines, at speeds exceeding 10 knots and in unfavorable wind conditions, rushed towards the rear of the Special Forces Fleet. With a distance between the 2 leading ships close to 300 meters, the First Fleet began its second formation change. The Drake Chamber's main gunships, including 2 destroyers and 2 frigates, generally used large-caliber bow mortars. The destroyers had 32-pounders, and the frigates had 48-pounders. In fact, this was not the design for each warship. In the draft design, the Valkyrie was supposed to be equipped with a 68-pounder super-heavy bow mortar. The 48-pounder was the standard for the Valkyrie's copycat, the Valkyrie-class Dame. Similarly, the first-generation Servant-class destroyer had a standard 32-pounder bow mortar, But the second generation was supposed to be upgraded to a 48-pounder to enhance its single-ship frontal assault capability. However, no one paid attention to the design. Lorraine still lacks a stable source of heavy naval guns. The 32-pounder cannons accumulated over the years are barely enough to replace the damage sustained by the Valkyrie and the Dame. Only 4 48-pounders have been purchased from Emmons. If any are damaged, the Dame will be downgraded. The design concept is merely a dream. Until the second Valkyrie and Dame's shipbuilding issues are resolved, the second-generation Servant, with 1 in service and 3 in dock, will officially be equipped with 32-pounders. No one would entertain such illusions. The mortar's effective range is only 150 meters, with a hit probability of less than 0% beyond that. Furthermore, of the 3 lead ships in the Special Forces formation, only the Dame possesses the short 18-pounder bow secondary guns, which, even with a direct hit, cannot penetrate the destroyer's defenses. This gives Fafnir ample time to execute a formation maneuver, treading on the last line of defense, leaving the Special Forces formation unable to react to the first formation's countermeasures. Under the command of the Mistral, her own ship lowered sails, while Brunhild unfurled her wing sails. The 3 ships, positioned at an optimal angle to the wind, rapidly accelerated, with Brunhild at 11 knots, Grey at 7, and Mistral at 4.5. Mistral, previously leading the way, quickly retreated from the fulcrum of the inverted V to the rear. Brunhild was the first to achieve a complete overtake, then, with a full starboard turn, launched a broadside from the extreme left of the formation, toward the center line of the 2 formations. At 200 meters, Brunhild fired at the mirror, but missed amidst the turbulence and quickly broke away. Grey then cut in from the starboard flank, pressing down on Mistral's bow at a range of 100 meters. From her starboard side, she launched a barrage of rounds of iron shells, cutting across at high speed, striking the bow of the Lady and the starboard side of the Neogene. Both the Mirai and Neogene retaliated with their bows. Shells from both sides crisscrossed midair. Amidst a mist, the new generation's bow hull was struck twice by 18-pounders. The tumbling shells shattered upon impact, coating the new generation's starboard front quarter with a thick, deep blue slurry. The Future's counterattack also struck the Grey, sending a thick, crimson slurry blasting across the center right aft of the ship, instantly covering both balconies. The crimson-bottomed Grey slashed through the center of the 2 fleets, while Mistral charged forward, closing the gap to within 70 meters of the Grand Lady. All gun ports, stand by, and waved her arms, shouting from beside Fafnir. 4 handguns, fire, 4 handguns, fire. Dylan, also perched at the bow, commanded simultaneously. Boom, 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 boom. The projectiles flew. The Lady's shells soared high, arcing over the Mistral's hull. One slammed into the sea behind her, while another grazed the aft deck with a thud, shattering into a dazzling spray of black ink. Mistral's shells also launched high, but their arc was much lower than the Lady's. Combined with the difference in freeboard height, one shell struck the Lady head-on, coating her port front hull with a burst of red. The other zipped past the Lady's bow anti-gun plating and slammed into the inner corner of the forecastle with a thud. Pierce, still bleary-eyed, shuddered, the sleepiness that had plagued him all morning vanishing. "What's the damage? Is anyone hurt?" Report. The practice rounds missed, no one on the forecastle hurt. Pierce's heart sank, but then he heard the sailor report back. However, the bowmast and bowsprits 1, 2, 4, and 6 are deemed broken. All bowsprits and foremasts 1, 5, and 6 are declared disabled. The port bow mortar is invalid. 17 sailors are out, and Daddy Dylan is declared killed. Pierce was stunned. "Dad, killed, yes." According to the referee's ruling, Daddy, the enemy ship cuts broadside. The sailors had no time to explain themselves. Alarms blared across the ship. After the bombardment, the Mistral charged into the fray, turning 5 degrees starboard into the narrow gap between the Lady and the new generation. Squeezing into the mere 50 meters of space between the 3 ships, the new generation, the Mistral, and the Lady passed side by side. Boards together, port, starboard, fire, boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. A perfect, imaginative tactical crossover. Nelson praised everything he saw over and over again. The timing, the distance between the ships, the execution, every function was performed flawlessly. It was like replaying a map in real life. "Drake, this is astonishing. There are commanders in this world who dare to carry out such a detailed tactical operation, and he's not even a real soldier. Calm down, Colonel. Lorraine touched the tip of his nose. Not only is he not a real soldier, he's not even a man. Admiral Hanji, Favnir Hanji, as her name suggests, is actually a shy little girl. Little girl, surprised? Surprised. Nelson sank down on the sofa. I wonder how much Great Britain has lost because of the Navy's ban on recruiting women. I guess not much. Whether it's Dippo or Hanji, even in the Caribbean, where discrimination against women is not that common, there are only a few outstanding female commanders. Collingwood put down the binoculars. Drake, is this the practice shell you prepared? Paint wrapped in iron sheet. I knew you would be interested in those shells. Lorraine clapped his hands lightly, and immediately a clerk came in with a document, bowed and handed it to Lorraine. Exercise Navy Shrapnel, Naval Exercise Shrapnel, Live Ammunition Number NSMK3, MK3, it is indeed Type 3. Lorraine handed the document to Collingwood. The purpose of the NS project is to develop shipborne shrapnel that can be used in practice. It has been promoted for 2 years. Its structure is not much different from the Army's shrapnel, including an iron shell, a wooden fuse slot, a hard trigger finger and an explosive bag at the bottom of the fuse slot. You all know that incendiary bombs filled with kerosene are the natural enemy of sailing ships. Even ordinary high-explosive bombs filled with black powder and fragments are countless times more powerful than ordinary solid bullets. However, the sea is too bumpy, and the accident rate of incendiary bombs remains high. The situation is similar for high-explosive bombs, so shrapnel cannot be used at sea. Drake tried to reduce the accident rate by improving the transportation method and adjusting the internal structure. However, even the third generation you saw still has an accident rate of more than 35% per 1,000 kilometers. Although it is much safer than the land-based shrapnel bomb for sea use, its use in actual combat is still a long way off. Fortunately, our efforts were not in vain. The Maritime Group's Coatings Department, in collaboration with the alchemists I hired, has developed a highly practical anti-corrosion coating. It's corrosion-resistant, fireproof, easily strippable with tune oil, and, most importantly, inexpensive. We experimented with adding color to this coating to replace the explosive filler in shrapnel shells. The resulting NS shells, specifically designed for training, are the key to enabling live fire exercises at sea. Nelson and Collingwood were stunned by the sudden advertisement. What a ridiculously lame sales pitch. They started with a groundbreaking naval shrapnel shells, with all the talk of 2 years and 3 types, yet the accident rate was a staggering 35%. This proves that Drake's R&D team simply haven't found an effective way to improve the stability of their shrapnel shells. A 35% accident rate. As far as Collingwood knew, that rate was far below the current development progress of major powers like Britain and France. Yet, Lorraine managed to whet Collingwood's appetite with this meaningless gimmick. Don't forget, today Collingwood is an observer for the Royal Navy's New World Fleet, a representative of Sir Peter Parker, and a crucial potential customer for this product exhibition. Lorraine's true intentions were revealed at this moment. The Drake Chamber of Commerce's unique new anti-corrosion coating and substandard marine shrapnel, the combination of the two is enough to drive any naval commander crazy. The possibility of a live fire confrontation at sea. Collingwood flipped speechlessly to the last page of the document in his hand. The price of the new paint coating, £3 10 shillings per square foot, tax included, NSMK3 exercise ammunition, all models are £1 each, tax included, shipping fee included. He snapped the document shut. Your price is too high, especially the shells. Only the logistics department needs to consider the cost of military supplies. Colonel Collingwood. Lorraine crossed his legs and said leisurely, you are a military observer and should pay more attention to the significance of live fire exercises to the Navy. If live fire exercises have promotional significance, the exercise ammunition is worthy of being put on the procurement list as a separate item. And if the exercise ammunition can really be included in the Navy's procurement list. Do you think that the Drake Chamber of Commerce is more greedy than those fat-bellied military suppliers in the country? Chapter 503 Duty. Boarding complete, aboard the Mistra, and shuts merged with the sailors' cries. Put out the fire on the mainsail immediately, organize men to mend the sails, and do everything possible to preserve the sails. Deemed disabled, Anne opened her mouth, coughed twice, and then her expression changed. The referee has ruled that mainmasts 1 and 2 are disabled, and the order has been withdrawn. Exhibitionist, pick 2 people to extinguish the fire on the sails and row them up. Don't make it difficult for the referee on board. Wild woman, your master Chenely is not an exhibitionist. Yes, you just don't like wearing clothes, and waved her hands perfunctorily, then suddenly raised her eyes with a murderous look. Idiot, put out the fire, or I'll kill you. Tisk, your master Chenely is not an idiot. Chenely complained weakly, turned around, and rushed downstairs. All units, report damage, including casualties, ship damage, and damage assessments, to command as quickly as possible. No delay, Anne's voice echoed across the deck, hoarse and untamed, yet it reassured everyone aboard. The crew regarded her as the captain's voice and voice. Without her, Fafner's personality wouldn't allow for even normal communication. It was because of her that the former White Pelican, now Mistra, and the 1st Squadron were able to repeatedly execute tactical maneuvers that amazed, even shocked, themselves. Just now, for example, they engaged the Atist Lady. First, they engaged the bowguns within 70 meters, then, like threading a needle, they weaved through the mere 50 meters between the Lady and the new code, literally clinging to the Lady's broadside, squeezing themselves out of the encirclement. They'd accomplished such remarkable feats, and yet they were still alive. Not only that, but Mistra's overall assessment remained intact, and her injuries were at least significantly less severe than those of the Lady and the new code. In hindsight, that nerve-wracking journey was a perfect blend of calculation and luck. As the lead ship of the 2nd-generation Aegis class, the Mistra drew upon the experience of the Valkyrie to maximize both offensive and defensive capabilities. Specifically, the 24-pounder short guns replaced the 12-pounder cannons previously mounted on the upper deck, with 6 per side, totaling 12. The upper deck was enclosed, raising the previously low freeboard. 32 1.5-inch armor plates were added to the hull outside the gun bays, 16 per side. At a distance of 50 meters, a direct hit of 18 pounds was required to penetrate, and 24 pounds or more was required to penetrate. The iron guards protecting the masts were also a Valkyrie innovation. The movable gun dams, combined with the enclosed upper deck, forcibly raised the Mistra's beam height to the same height as the Grand Dame, providing significant protection for the crew. With these upgrades, especially the significant improvements in defense, they truly achieved a perfection they could only dream of. At a relative range of 40 meters and a relative speed of 9.2 knots, the Mistra, after the bombardment, turned starboard 5 degrees to cut broadside. At the time of the cut, the gap between the ships and the Dame was only 7 meters. By the time they were parallel, the 2 ships' beams were less than 3 meters apart. 3 collisions occurred, resulting in the dislodging of 4 armor plates and a significant deformation of the latticework. At this range, the Mistra engaged the Dame and the Neustadt. Neustadt fired at ranges of 35 to 40 meters, hitting 11 out of 16 targets, including 7 direct hits. Due to its low beam height, none of the shots were successfully dropped high. Mistra's starboard armor plates were deflected, and 2 areas of the enclosed upper deck were damaged. The number 3 secondary gun, 24-pounder, was disabled. Mistra scored 7 out of 16 targets, including 3 direct hits. One of the shells was deemed a penetration, disabling Neustadt's 6th and 7th main guns. One shell, dropped onto the deck, was deemed a penetration and caused a fire, resulting in the loss of 6 sailors and a serious injury to the sailmaster. At ranges between 0 and 5 meters, the Dame fired 9 of her 21 guns due to collisions. 11 of her remaining 12 shells hit the target, including 2 lobbed shells and 1 that hit the ship. The lobbed shell struck the mainmast, causing a fire on the mainsail and disabling both sails. Due to the limited range, the remaining shells all impacted the Mistral's port side. The port armor plating either dislodged or was deemed breached, theoretically stripping the broadside cleanly. 1 penetration was recorded on the upper deck and 2 on the hull. Secondary guns numbers 3 and 4, and main guns numbers 1, 6, and 7 on the port side were disabled, resulting in the loss of 31 sailors. The Mistral's counterattack was unlikely to be as effective. 11 of her 16 shells fired, all hitting the hull and disabling the Dame's port main gun number 9. The Dame's true damage came in the initial bow gun exchange. Due to Mistra's precise high throw, the ship's bowsprit, foresail, and port bow gun were all declared disabled, resulting in the loss of 7 sailors and the death of Vice Admiral Dylan Snaps. Furthermore, since the damage also included part of the gaff line, According to the exercise rules, the lady was required to first disable this portion of the gaff line, then reattach the rigging around it. This process effectively disabled the lady's foresail, a far greater impact on navigation than if the bowsprit had actually been broken by the enemy in combat. Pierce couldn't help but feel the surreal sensation of waking up from a shipwreck only to find himself stranded on a deserted island. This feeling of unreality reached its peak the moment he saw Dylan. Dylan stood before him, splattered with crimson paint and emitting the stench of rotting fish, scratching his hair sheepishly. "Dad, are you really dead? Dead? How did you die?" I was commanding the battle on the bow deck, and the bowgun of Mistra exploded right above my head. I managed to avoid the shrapnel, but the paint. Dylan wiped his red face with his red hands. Edley said that according to the drill rules, I was completely burned by the incendiary bomb. "I am now charcoal, and you might not even be able to see your face." Pierce's forehead was throbbing with veins. Mr. Edley, yes, if I remember correctly, the president said that if we don't make a key breakthrough, the NS project will not be successful even 10 years later. Yes, Edley held the thick book of drill rules, but this is a drill. The imagination of the drill cannot exceed reality, otherwise it will lose its reference significance. "You have a point," Edley nodded apologetically to Dylan. "I take back what I said, Vice Admiral Snaps. Based on the existing technology, you could not have been burned to death. You should have died from a shotgun shell. Considering the location and area of your bullet, you should have been hit by more than 20 fragments. Theoretically, the largest fragment belonging to you would not exceed the size of your forearm." "Forearm?" Dylan raised his hand and pointed at his head. "It seems that even if I die in a different way, I still can't save my face." "That's not quite accurate." "That's indeed not accurate." Edley tried to offer some comfort, but Pierce rudely interrupted him. "Mr. Edley, current technology doesn't allow us to deliver a shotgun blast over Dad's head and have it explode. It's still a shrapnel blast, just a high explosive blast instead of an incendiary one. You're getting too hung up on the details, and please tell me, what shotgun blast could possibly rip off a lady's bowsprit?" "At the impact point, a portion of the paint wrapped around your bowsprit. According to the drill rules, it should be considered severance by a chain bullet," Edley replied crisply. "Chain bullets? What?" dismembered the old man. "Shotgun shells." Pierce was going crazy. "Please explain clearly. Were the ones Mistra fired at shotgun shells or chain bullets?" Edley hugged the rule book and thought for a while. "Both, but there was only one bullet that hit the deck." "This is beyond the description of the rules," Edley said. "Vice President, live fire drills are a new thing. I will report the problems you encounter to the Fleet Exercise Department, but that will be after the battle. Now please concentrate on fighting." "Huh?" Pierce was shaking with anger. "What about her attack? 32 pounds just hit Mistra's hull in the face. Why does she look like nothing happened? Am I only qualified to knock off her armor plates?" "It should be more than just knocking off armor plates, but according to the drill rules, the benefits of most bullets are limited to breaking armor." "Hey, aren't these drill rules too biased towards Mistra?" Even referring to the test parameters of the maritime group, 32 pounds can easily chisel open the hull of a destroyer after penetrating a 1.5-inch iron plate, right? Zero distance. Edley's face was expressionless. "First, I'm not the referee, Mistra. My words are merely a guide to the drill rules. Second, you may have doubts. Please wait until you can appeal. I doubt the impartiality of the drill referee." The conversation abruptly ended. The resentful Pierce, the helpless Dylan, the frantic crew, and the solemn and serious Edley all formed a masterpiece called Strike. Edley set aside the rule book and met Pierce's gaze without flinching. "Regarding your last question, at the referee meeting before the exercise, the president gave a speech to all the chief referees, warning us not to forget our duties. Drake is a chamber of commerce. As long as it is war content, every one of us, every ship, every gun, and everything we do should serve the business. The essence of this live fire exercise is a product launch for the maritime group, and it is also to build momentum for real estate transactions in Miami. Since it is a launch, we need to figure out the target users of each ship. The target groups of the Seabird and Delicate Flower classes are ordinary chambers of commerce and powerful individual businessmen. They need to see the speed and self-protection capabilities of the ship. The target group of the first-generation Samurai class is powerful large chambers of commerce. They need to see the different performance of the ship against the strong and the weak. The second-generation Samurai class and Valkyrie class are benchmarked against the upper and lower limits of frigates, and their target groups are the navies of major powers such as Britain, France, Spain, and the United States. The exercise needs to build a platform for the two ships to fully demonstrate their strength. Let our customers know why, for the same price, the second-generation Samurai is a better choice than the standard frigate, even if it is only a level 5 ship. The same goes for the Lady. She's a high-speed frigate with a cost of over £65,000, and a purchase price of £90,000. For the same price, why would those navies give up a second or third-tier battleship? We need to give them a reason through exercises, and the Valkyrie class we can deliver won't carry a 32-pounder. The main guns are 18-pounders, the secondary guns are shorter 24-pounders, and the bow gun is a 32-pounder. The upgrade potential is a special benefit this ship type offers customers. It's not our delivery standard, nor is it the criterion for judging this public exercise. Now, do you still have any doubts? Pierce's face paled and tinged, and he stood there for a long moment. The difference between me and my brother, he muttered. A businessman's duty, a businessman's awareness. Indeed, ignoring the purpose in pursuing fairness is a foolish act. Even a real navy wouldn't pursue fairness for the sake of fairness. Dad, go get some rest. He passed between Dylan and Edley. His childish face was no longer filled with resentment, grievance, or fatigue, only with a high spirit. Third sister, inform everyone on the ship that Dad has died in battle, so that they can cheer up. Order. Reiner has half an hour to reset the sails. In half an hour, I want the foremast to be restored to full condition. Even if the bowmast is lost, it must not affect the navigation of the Lady. Zio-Sanmi glanced at the colorful forecastle and nodded silently. Okay, the rest of the ships. New Generation and Future are responsible for providing cover for the Lady. Also tell Sunflower and Headless Ostrich that we are temporarily unable to provide support for them. They need to make full use of the vast water surface and their own flexibility to fight against the majority of enemies. Tell them that the longer they live, the greater their contribution to victory. I'll look forward to their performance. Yeah, product launch meeting. Pierce spread out his clothes with a rustle, letting his windbreaker swing in the wind, like the loosened sails on the foremast. Special Forces Formation, Action. Chapter 504, Fear and Fear Are Different. The Mistra. Unlike the Lady, which had been beaten dazed but now had a fighting spirit, the Mistra was enjoying a period of recovery after escaping a dangerous situation. The ship was quiet. The sailors were cleaning the messy decks and cabins, even whispering to each other, fearing a reprimand from the supervisor. Anne emerged from the galley, the newly completed battle damage report tucked under her arm, a cup of fragrant hot cocoa in her hand, greeting the sailors as she ascended the forecastle. Fafner was hunched over a nautical chart, drawing something with her head hunched. Admiral, Anne called, but there was no response. Fafner, she used her name, speaking a little louder. Fafner jumped up, dropped her pen and chart, and scrambled to the upper deck railing, grasping the railing and carefully turning her head. What a face it was! The little face was flushed, the hair was disheveled, and the big eyes rarely showed from behind the hair, but they were soaked with tears. The slightest sway would make them burst out of the eye sockets and hit the ground with a crackling sound. Anne's mind was buzzing. Farna, don't cry, don't, Annie. The little admiral pouted aggrievedly, trying hard to suppress the urge to cry. Just now, I thought I was going to die. You did a great job. Our losses were not big. Really not big, but we were hit by dozens of shells. I saw the carpentry room removing the armor plates, and it seemed that all the armor plates on the port side were going to be removed. After all, we squeezed past the Lady, and getting skinned by a 32-pounder cannon was inevitable. Anne gently put down the battle damage statistics, walked over and handed cocoa to Valrina. Your hot cocoa is extra strong, thank you. Farna thanked her timidly, holding the cup of cocoa to her lips and licking it like a kitten. It's too cold. Well, the guys in the kitchen made it at the beginning of the assault, saying that they must not burn the admiral's tongue again. Anne smiled and squeezed next to Farna, and as soon as she reached out, she got a battle damage statistics in her hand. Statistics show that the bow and stern attack capabilities are intact, starboard firepower has decreased by 40%, and port firepower has decreased by 50%. The hull is completely penetrated, but there are no actual holes, so there will be no secondary explosions or flooding. Also, some of the cross sails were damaged, reducing the speed by about 10%. The wing sails and auxiliary sails are intact, but the armor and gunboat shields have suffered significant damage. You must be careful when making plans for the next approach. Next, Fafner, who had finally suppressed her tears, burst out again. I almost forgot there's a next approach. Fafnir. Fafnir. It's okay if you don't want to approach. This exercise only lasts 4 hours. My lady damaged the bowmast. We just have to hold on for another 3.5 hours, only 3.5 hours left. The admiral looked at the first mate pitifully. Yes, Fafnir quickly took a swig of cocoa to calm her nerves. Without even wiping her lips, she scrambled back to the chart, retrieved her pen, and continued drawing. Anne sighed deeply, leaning against the railing and continuing to comfort him. Fafnir, don't worry. Although the lady's firepower is strong and her hull is thick, with your strength, if you insist on holding on to yipping, even Vice President Otis will be helpless against us. Our advantage is obvious, Annie. Come and see. Fafnir waved with her head down. We don't have enough time, and the lady's bowmast was damaged. Before it is adjusted, it should be in the most clumsy stage. I know our situation is also very bad, but if we don't seize such a good opportunity, there will be no chance to sink the lady. Anne felt comforted in her heart, that is to say, it's not dangerous at all. You said, sink. Well, what needs to be dealt with is simple. We will turn around immediately, Brunhild and Grey will entangle the future in the new code, and we will bite the lady's ass. Bite the ass. Anne pinched herself hard and crawled over. Fafnir, are you not afraid anymore? Afraid? Fafnir raised her head with tears in her eyes. But if we don't win, wouldn't it be a waste of fear? Main formation, turn around and pursue at full speed. The ships on both wings will continue to encircle us. Annie, calm the crew. Hearing her friend's affirmative response, Fafnir threw down her pen, sat down on the chart with her knees hugged, and stared at the sea. Annie, tell me, why did the President and Sister Catalina arrange this exercise, and why did they tie it to the product exhibition at this time? The exercise was in full swing. On the vast sea, the headless ostrich and the sunflower decisively broke away from the main formation, taking advantage of the vast battlefield to sail rapidly away from the main formation. The brigantine and brig, both 6th-level ships of the 1st Squadron, swung around and encircled them with great force. These Bermuda-sized ships quickly outran the wind, reaching 12 knots, far exceeding the maximum speed of conventional gunboats. Yet, their sailing posture clearly showed ease. The audience was captivated by the romance and excitement of the race. While the chase might appear inconspicuous at first glance compared to the ever-changing main battle, once the smoke clears, the stark contrast of world-class speed and agility instantly strikes the eye, replacing the previous brutal thrill of animal combat and evoking a deep-seated yearning. The Maritime Group is a world leader in the design of the most optimally designed high-speed vessels. Its product catalog includes the 15.5-knot first-generation Servant class, the 14.5-knot second-generation Servant class, and the 14.5-knot Valkyrie class for military use. For civilian use, the 18-knot Petty class and 16-knot Seabird class are prime examples. These high-speed vessels, dubbed the Drake design, are characterized by their slender, fluid, and sharp forms, achieving exceptional speed while maintaining an average level of stability and agility. The Seabird class brig and the Brigantine class, in particular, are the Maritime Group's mainstays for mid to low-end customers. The Seabird offers balanced attack and defense, while the Brigantine is affordable, offering compelling advantages in their respective target markets. Lorraine has spared no effort in their marketing. 3 years after the main structure was finalized, he conducted limited promotional activities within the 100 Merchants Association. Although not open for general ordering, the reputation of these two vessels has spread across the Atlantic through the association's mouths. Under pressure from these forces, major shipyards have rushed to launch their own new models. In the past 2 years, the New World civilian 6th class market has introduced 70 new Bermuda-based models, with average top speed increasing from 11.5 knots to 14 knots this year. This sudden technological explosion caught the established European shipyards, which previously dominated the civilian sailing market, by surprise. Under the onslaught of their dynamic New World counterparts, their market share was shaky. Even the mainstream naval mentality, traditionally focused on stability and strength, was being challenged, with high-speed naval warfare becoming a hot topic in recent years. It was at this time that Lorraine, having largely satisfied his own needs, finally allowed the Maritime Group to fully open its product catalog to the market, capitalizing on the Miami development boom that had begun. He considered the live-fire exercises of the First Fleet and the Special Forces in the Bay of Biscay to be both a product launch for the Maritime Group and a real estate marketing event for the asset company. Lorraine was busy. Having aroused the desire to shop, Captain Collingwood, the representative of Great Britain, quickly excused himself from the box and turned to his next target, the American representative. The viewing platform was bustling with activity, as well-prepared sales representatives roamed among the capitalists, both large and small, showcasing the warships gliding across the sea while subtly exaggerating the bright prospects of Miami. The topmost box was also bustling with activity. Catalina and the Spanish representative were chatting and laughing, while Chuck, who had come from New York, accompanied the French representative. The Dutch and Danish representatives shared a room, and Karen toasted with them. The Portuguese were also invited to attend. After all, there are no permanent enemies in the business world. Lorraine strolled to the door of the American box, straightened his clothes, and knocked gently. "Mr. Hamilton, may I come in?" The door swung open, and Alexander Hamilton, with his purple eyes, leaned back on the sofa with a smile, his face full of sarcasm. "Why meet with the British first?" he asked. "Kenway, America needs a reasonable explanation." Chapter 505 America's Dilemma. Why meet the British first? As soon as the door opened, Hamilton, who hadn't seen him for a long time, posed this question to Lorraine, a question for which there was absolutely no correct answer. Furthermore, he addressed Lorraine as Kenway and vowed that America demanded a reasonable explanation. Lorraine glared with ill intent at his old friend, Alexander Hamilton, a founding father, a trusted pillar of the president, the acting secretary of the Treasury, the initiator and core organizer of the Bank of the United States bill. Is America out of money? Lorraine's response was completely irrelevant. Hamilton's smile faltered. "Mr. President, you once possessed the true friendship of a great nation. But don't forget that friendship requires cultivation. If you fail to properly maintain it, perhaps, then the federal government is out of money." "Yes," the young wife immediately admitted defeat, standing up and personally pouring Lorraine a glass. "Since I'm so frank, can we sit down and talk? That's how friendship is cultivated," Lorraine said earnestly. He walked into the private room, sat on the sofa, and clinked his glass with Hamilton's. "Mr. Secretary of the Treasury, you just nearly lost the friendship of a great chamber of commerce." Tisk. Hamilton downed the bitter wine in one gulp. "Other pirates keep parrots, but you are essentially a parrot. Thank you for the compliment." Outside the Chamber of Commerce, Lorraine only had two close friends. Their friendship with Nelson was based on an employment relationship, close but not intimate. They had consensus and cooperation, but also a personal distance that could not be easily crossed. Hamilton's friendship was built on a mutually beneficial relationship during a special period, close but not intimate. While there were no taboos or formalities in their interactions, they could never set aside their own calculations. Perhaps this was the pattern of adult friendship, either a gap in will or a gap in perspective. Pure intimacy and closeness didn't exist, and no one sought to achieve it. Lorraine took a sip of his wine and noticed the telescope prepared for Hamilton was still in place. "What? Maritime drama isn't your thing?" "It's not my cup of tea at all," Hamilton made an exaggerated, regretful expression. "I'm in the army, and while I have dock experience, I still have only a limited understanding of the intricacies of the sea. I know it's a minor quibble I should overcome, and it's my duty as a national observer, but who allowed my tour guide to get into the British box? Since the tour guide doesn't care about the huge American order, why should I bother myself by challenging myself to something I'm not good at?" Lorraine began to get annoyed. He put his glass down and crossed his legs. "Speak frankly, Alexander. What does your president expect of me?" Silence. Hamilton fiddled with his glass, tracing his fingertips around the rim. When Lorraine counted to 10, he suddenly said, "The war is won, the war is won. We've driven out the British. We've accomplished a great cause, fulfilled the wishes of those who died in the war, and built a beacon of human civilization that fully implements God's will on that sinful land. We thought that as long as we drove out the British, all this would be a matter of course, but," Hamilton laughed bitterly, "it seems we've oversimplified the problem. Congress wants to build America into a truly powerful, reliable democracy. They want to establish a unified constitution, issue a strong currency, have a developed industry, and maintain a powerful army. The prerequisite for all this is to establish a strong central government, but the states don't want a true federal government. They just want to be the sole masters of their own countries. They don't want anyone to dictate their rule, and they don't want to share the power with others. Thus, former comrades have become enemies. And we can't drive them out like we drove out the British, because we depend on each other. Hamilton poured himself another glass of wine and drank it without clinking glasses. Snap. Kenway, we are engaged in a new war. This war is destined to be longer and more brutal than the Revolutionary War. We need your help, just as you did in the Revolutionary War, to stand firmly by our side, he called out to Kenway for the second time. The moment Kenway spoke, Lorraine felt the weight of the air. He finally understood why President Washington had chosen Hamilton, now out of uniform, as an observer for these military exercises, rather than a more qualified and knowledgeable Admiralty official. Hamilton wasn't in Miami as a military observer at all, he was a lobbyist. Lorraine didn't immediately respond to Hamilton's request. He quietly pondered the pros and cons, and midway through, he suddenly realized that his glass had unknowingly been empty. He laughed. If a distinguished gentleman would condescend to pour me a glass, the glass filled in the blink of an eye. Well, what can I gain from this? Lorraine asked. Business, Hamilton replied bluntly. Just like back then, it's an equal exchange. America will make the most generous offer for your kindness, but you've already admitted that the federal government is strapped for cash. No matter how poor the federal government is, it's still the federal government. As long as the money is well spent, we never skimp on it. The two exchanged a smile and simultaneously shifted into comfortable sitting positions. Out at sea, Brunhild was battling the future, while Grey was stalking the new generation. Farina once again seized the initiative, taking advantage of the lady's foremast adjustments to continuously threaten her vulnerable poop. The White Pelican squadron finally entangled the Sunflower. Leaving the Puffin, Fregatebird, and Dark Champagne to strangle the weakened enemy ship, the White Pelican returned alone, swiftly intersecting the battle between Mistra and the lady from the outside, like a small weight that tipped the scales on the battlefield. The First Fleet thus gained a complete advantage. Lorraine pointed at the White Pelican and said to Hamilton, "See that brig? Her main gun is only 12 pounds. Even if the lady stopped and let her fire, she'd have a hard time penetrating her hull." But Hamilton gazed out to sea, confused. "The lady looks in a state of distress. That's because the Mistral is capable of threatening the lady," Lorraine explained. "If the lady underestimates the minor trouble the White Pelican might cause, she'll face major trouble one day." Hamilton's eyes blazed. "I'm so glad we can fight side by side again. I haven't decided whether to agree to this." Lorraine paused, grinning. "But you're right about one thing, my dear Alexander. I'd like to hear your business, and I sincerely hope it's a big one. P.S. The founding of the United States was a difficult undertaking. Washington, D.C., was built from scratch on a barren land. From 1785 to 1790, the federal government had to shelter in New York State. The Department of the Treasury wasn't officially established until 1789, a year before the capital was relocated. One reason for this was the state's reluctance to shoulder the massive debts incurred during the Revolutionary War. The bill for the Bank of the United States later became the First Bank of the United States, the predecessor of the Federal Reserve. However, it was a private bank that offered both savings and loans, 70% of which was owned by a foreign consortium. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506 Cult. Ride 10 degrees starboard, cut in, Brynhilder is closing in. Path blocked, warning. Evade, cross broadside, port side, fire, repel fire, main formation. No one could have imagined that a simple internal confrontation exercise within the Drake Chamber of Commerce's fleet would truly live up to its name and become the decisive battle it envisioned. The 1st Squadron and the Special Service Squadron went into a frenzy of attack. The fragments embedded in the hull, the dazzling, iridescent paint, the scattered, twisted armor plates, the ripped cables, the furled sails, the sealed gun ports, the shouting sailors, all demonstrated that even the use of non-lethal shells could not shake their determination to send their opponents to the bottom of the sea. After crossing broadside, the 1st Squadron's main formation swiftly turned, taking advantage of the critical moment when the lady had lost her foresail set, significantly impacting her speed and agility, to resume the battle. Brunhild led the charge, forcing her way between the future and the lady, braving the gunfire and forcing the lady out of the way, leaving her unable to focus on the flagship's defenses. The Grey wasn't far behind, charging even harder, its menacing presence causing the new generation to believe it was about to be boarded even at medium speed. It wasn't until Freemantle instinctively issued the order to retreat and heard the laughter and cheers aboard the Grey that this core member of Operation Sea Reach realized what was happening. "We've been tricked," he gritted his teeth. The first mate beside him eyed him cautiously. "Captain, the lady is isolated, return to guard immediately. The lady is vulnerable now." "If the Grey is closing in," the sailor's roar interrupted Freemantle's words. 70-meter broadside. Port side hit, full stare, boom boom boom. Port side, return fire, Freemantle fiercely ordered the bombardment. Tisk. Just a new admiral, but those people in the first squadron, are they crazy? On the left, the future was squeezed out by Brunhild. On the right, Grey was pushing the new generation to the limit. A vast expanse of sea, over 400 meters wide, stretched behind the lady. The Mistra swooped in and bit the lady's tail. Aboard the Mistra, the sailors gathered around their admiral and captain, Fafnir, as they had before the battle. Fafnir had her back to them, her small body huddled up, clutching a large nautical chart. Anne, radiating her powerful, unyielding demeanor, reappeared. "Admiral, please give me a lecture." Snap. Everyone snapped to attention, causing Fafnir to shudder. "That is urgent," she whispered softly. "We're running out of time," Anne thundered. "The lady. Vice President Otis. We must inflict damage before she regains her mobility. The lady is powerful, more powerful than the entire First Fleet. Vice President Otis is also a highly skilled admiral. As his direct disciple, we have no reason to doubt his abilities." Anne continued her super translation, akin to analyzing ancient Chinese text. "But we have a chance to win right now. In the previous encounter, we destroyed the lady's bowsprit. According to the information the referee provided us, they will likely need to fully rebuild the foremast rig. And indeed, the lady's foremast is indeed in a state of slack. Until the rig is built, her speed and agility will be reduced to a minimum. We must seize this opportunity and inflict as much damage as possible. Target the stern rudder." Fafnir mustered her courage and turned, looking up timidly. Dozens of eager eyes suddenly focused on her, frightening her so much that she quickly retreated behind the chart. A voice drifted from behind the large board. Use the bow gun, hold on, watch the angle, use our bow gun," and gnashed her teeth at these rough men, her voice tinged with murder. "Nip that lady from the rear, bite her ass, don't get into the angle of her broadsides, order. Tail following engagement begins. Separate the bow and foremast cables in an orderly manner, and concentrate the gunboards on the bow. Target the center of the enemy's poop, fully reload the bow gun, and fire rapidly. Do you understand?" "Yes, Admiral, please give the order." Snap. Fafnir was startled again by the knocking of the heels. She hid behind her writing board, looking at Anne with a pleading look. Anne gave her a sunny smile, silently encouraging her to face her crew bravely. She was really overthinking it. Fafnir didn't raise her head, didn't straighten her back, and didn't even straighten her knees a bit. "Everyone, shrapnel, be careful, you can't avoid stray bullets." Anne fully understood her friend's meaning. "If you're a man, stand tall and take down the noble lady in front. Anyone who dares to shrink their neck will receive 100 lashes and the mainmast will be displayed for 24 hours. Fafnir was nearly mad. Unbeknownst to her, she pulled herself up with courage, her face flushed and anxiously gazing at everyone. "No, no, Admiral's order," everyone roared. Even a veteran like Chinori, who lacked trust in Fafnir, was swept away by the frenzy in the air. To die for the goddesses, to die without regrets. Run. Everyone, run, ride 5 degrees right. Hold the tail, raise all the gun panels, leaving no one behind, detach the cables. Don't affect navigation, and prepare for the foremast to be destroyed. Range 70 meters, bowgun, fire. Fafnir stared blankly at the sudden event, her hands and feet weak, wanting only to sit down and cry. "Annie, you guys, I don't care about you anymore. 2 plans, 2 deals for you. Which one do you want to look at first? A or B?" In the private room of the viewing platform, Lorraine and Hamilton sat opposite each other, as they would in a typical business negotiation. A table separated them, and on it lay 2 blank covers of the business plan documents side by side. Lorraine held her chin in her hand and thought for a moment. "Any hints? Or, Are these two deals related? The biggest connection, Hamilton smiled. Both parties A are the United States. You may not be the only party B, but you are definitely the first party B in the world to see the plan. In other words, it doesn't matter which one you choose. Lorraine showed no gratitude and pointed to the thick book. The problem is, I don't have time to read every sentence right now. That's not a problem. Hamilton reached out and pushed the book Lorraine had chosen forward half an inch. If you are willing to trust me, I can give you a simple explanation of the plan. How could I trust you on an issue related to the United States? A dark aura rose on Hamilton's face. Then what do you say? I'll take care of it. You take care of it. Lorraine flipped open the plan, and her slender fingers gently ran over the title at the top of the first page, Revolving Door Plan, Preparatory Plan for the First Bank of the United States. It's actually a national bank. To be honest, this business is much bigger than I imagined. Chapter 507 Revolving Door Plan. So, Mr. Explainer, first, please tell me what a revolving door is. Lorraine flipped through the bank's plan page by page, his mind resonating with the beautiful, crisp, typographical cursive on the first line. Revolving door. While it's entirely possible that Hamilton just implied the name, using the door of a bank as a metaphor for the national bank's plan, Lorraine was obsessed with it, even though he didn't know why. Hamilton smiled contentedly. If someone else had asked me, I would have told them it was because the door of the first bank is a 3-meter-high glass revolving door, but you're Lorraine Drake, Edward Kenway, so it's neither right nor wrong for me to use the first layer of meaning to justify it. So you prepared 2 layers of prevarication. Who knows? Maybe I'm telling the whole truth, or maybe I've prepared 3 or 4 layers of prevarication. It wouldn't be that much trouble, would it? That makes sense. Lorraine put down the book and sat up straight. I'm all ears. Are you aware of America's financial situation? Hamilton suddenly asked. The current state of the finances, Lorraine pondered for a moment. Deeply in debt, that's only one aspect. Hamilton crossed his legs. How should I put it? Because of the sensitivity of wealth, after the war's victory, the states have refused to relinquish their financial power. The provisional treasury is responsible for only a tiny portion of the government's operating funds. This operating fund looks a bit like the national taxes paid by the states, but it's actually just a high membership fee. Just like the fees you members of the association pay to headquarters in Havana every year, we can only decide where this money is spent, not the source of income. Because of this, the debt left over from the war is also in the hands of the state finances. Hamilton raised his mouth with disdain. Do you know how much debt we owed from that war? Lorraine took a sip of his wine. 4 million? Or 6 million? 4 million is our population. The total amount of bonds issued by the 13 states, over 10 million pounds. That's, Lorraine was shocked by the number. Taxation is the main source of national revenue, but it's difficult to impose colonial-level high tax rates on the mainland. A simple calculation, assuming 40% of the population is employed, an average annual income of £20, and a 25% tax rate, would reveal that the 13 states would only collect £8 million in tax revenue annually. Excluding national expenditures, no more than £500,000 could be used to repay the debt. This data isn't exact, but the remarkable thing is that after adjusting for various advantages and disadvantages, it's often not significantly different from the actual results, making the calculation quite valuable. In other words, Americans will have to pay off their current debt for 20 years. Hamilton looked at Lorraine with amusement. Have you figured it out? Raise taxes? Cut spending? Lorraine asked. Hamilton shrugged. With Congress behind the scenes, they can't do anything. He clapped his hands excitedly. The financial power is not in the hands of the government for the time being, but it will eventually return to the government. We have set several time nodes. The earliest is the first debt peak in 1787, and the slowest is the second debt peak in 1790, but no matter when they surrender, no matter when we establish a real U.S. Department of the Treasury, there must be a condition attached, and that is to properly resolve the debt crisis in the shortest time possible and maintain the national credit of the United States. The essence of the revolving door plan is the U.S. debt restructuring plan. Hamilton raised his finger and pointed it on the table, making a light stroke. I've proposed this plan to establish a private central bank modeled after Great Britain, the first bank of the United States. The first bank's primary task will be to issue a national currency, the U.S. dollar. The value and form of the currency have yet to be determined, but we will definitely issue it. We will use branches in each state to recycle old currency and issue new currency. At the same time, we will issue new bonds, which can only be purchased with a new currency. This will allow us to recycle the new currency and use it to buy back old debt, issue new currency, buy back old currency, issue new bonds, recycle new currency, buy back old bonds, free up credit space, and continue to issue new currency. He drew circles on the table. This will be like one link after another, constantly circulating golden national credit. By replacing the old with the new, we will free the country from its debt crisis and no longer rely solely on fiscal revenue. This is the revolving door plan. The echo lingered in his ears. Hamilton excitedly finished his plan, reservedly awaiting Lorraine's shocked response. Lorraine then returned to his book, as if he hadn't heard him. The only difference was that he was turning the pages much faster. After waiting for a long time, Hamilton finally couldn't hold back any longer. Such a great plan, don't you have any feelings at all? Yes, Lorraine said without raising his head. What a waste of resources, huh? Lorraine quickly read the entire plan and snapped the document shut. When do you plan to set up the first bank preparatory committee? Preparatory committee? Hamilton showed an embarrassment on his face. Although the revolving door plan has been recognized by most members of Congress and the President, and has the strong support of Mr. Adams, it is not legitimate. Before it is formally authorized by Congress, at the latest next year, a preparatory committee will be established, which will also perform the duties of the minting committee and begin to demonstrate the issuance model and other details of the new currency. Hamilton slapped the table. Are you crazy? The minting committee has exceeded the authority of the Provisional Ministry of Finance. The new currency is the core of your revolving door plan, and the first bank is just a carrier. Lorraine held the plan with great momentum. In my opinion, as long as there is a new currency and an institution to carry out the circulation, your plan will be able to rotate smoothly. This is certainly a good thing for America, but First Bank is a private bank. How can the interests of shareholders, or my interests, be guaranteed? Savings, loans, national loans and tax deposits, aren't these national bank businesses enough to satisfy your greed? Absolutely not enough, Lorraine said in a sonorous voice. First Bank's total share capital is £10 million. The American consortium, how can it support 50%? No, then how long can a national bank dominated by a foreign consortium exist? After losing the American national business, even if the bank continues to exist, how will you realize the profits you mentioned? Risk is not proportional to output. This is the biggest problem with the revolving door plan. Luckily, you found me first. I happen to have done research on bonds. Lorraine smiled like a fox. Last year, the Drake Chamber of Commerce issued development bonds in London with 10% of its shares as collateral. The share capital was worth £300,000 and eventually raised £1.14 million, a premium of 280%. This proves that bonds can appreciate in value. As long as the bond issuers continue to demonstrate promising development vitality, people's expectations for the bonds will far exceed their value. This is the greatest benefit that the Arc de Triomphe project can bring to shareholders. Lorraine sat down and took a sip of wine to calm his excitement. Let's get back to your plan. The new currency needs time to circulate and accumulate credibility, which all takes time, so the first bank must be established, and the new currency must be issued before the first bank is established. But this harms the interests of the bank's shareholders and deprives them of the benefits of the right to mint coins. How should we strike a balance? The natural approach is to unify the bank's preparatory committee and the minting committee, allowing the original shareholders to preside over the minting of the new currency from the outset, and then smoothly integrate it into the bank's operations. In this way, by the time the bank is established, the new currency will have been in circulation for some time. The bank can immediately start the circulation of the Arc de Triomphe project's currency bonds, issuing a large amount of new bonds and replacing a large amount of old bonds. The bank itself will become the largest creditor of the United States, because the national business is in the hands of the bank, and most of the government's new debt will flow to the bank. Then it's the shareholders' business activities. They speculate on bonds, increase the bond value, and the bank will release the bonds at the appropriate time, realizing the bank's core profits from the premium. The United States does not need to sacrifice for shareholders. On the contrary, as long as the bond market is strong enough, the United States can also reap a large amount of increased national credit from it, and then mint more coins, putting everything into a virtuous cycle. The foundation of all this lies in the Mint Commission, which preceded the bank. Lorraine looked at Hamilton. Since you can't provide us with long-term benefits, then create conditions for us to be self-profitable. This is your unshirkable obligation, that of the future U.S. Treasury." Hamilton frowned and fell silent. "How much can you invest?" In 1787, £500,000. In 1790, £1 million. In addition, I can convince the 100 Merchants Association to take at least £3 million. What's the guarantee? By tomorrow night at the latest, the Drake Chamber of Commerce can sign a memorandum of investment intention with the Provisional Ministry of Finance. If you need a memorandum of association, give me a month. After a month, both memoranda will be signed simultaneously. I will use them to convince the President and Congress to provide me with secret authorization." "Okay." Lorraine extended his hand to Hamilton, and Hamilton shook it tightly with a snap. "Deal." Chapter 508 Patriot Thousand-Layer Pancake. Hamilton's revolving door plan is undoubtedly an inestimable source of future profits for the Chamber of Commerce, though its realization may take several years, or even a decade. But as the saying goes, good things come late. The Drake Chamber of Commerce only digested its first wave of huge profits in the past 2 years. The Miami real estate project has the potential to become a second wave, and Carmen is single-handedly driving it. The revolving door could become the third wave of growth for the Chamber of Commerce, followed by the maritime and mining groups. Rather than a late explosion, it's more like a perfect timing, filling the gap in mining development and scientific research reserves. Lorraine suddenly realized that Hamilton, who had unexpectedly delivered him, had completed the final piece of his century-long business empire puzzle. All he needed to do now was to realize it step by step, and the Drake Chamber of Commerce would become unstoppable. With this realization, Hamilton's second proposal suddenly became dull. While it was equally a truly significant undertaking, and compared to the revolving door of the future, it was more imminent, and it closely aligned with the purpose of Lorraine's product launch today. It was the American Naval Revitalization Plan. As far as Lorraine knew, this was the second naval revitalization plan since the United States was established as a political entity, receiving its first recognition and establishing diplomatic relations. The first revitalization plan was driven by Thomas Jefferson, a founding father, governor of Virginia, and congressman. He also held a more important position, as the leader of the American Confederate political community, advocating that a strong central government was the enemy of the republic and that the re-election of a leader was a breeding ground for dictatorship. In other words, he was the greatest political enemy of Adams and Hamilton. Back then, the naval revitalization plan he had promoted, which had chosen Boston's Haight Shipyard, was ultimately aborted amid Federalist opposition. The Haight Shipyard, in turn, suffered a crushing defeat, and Lorraine, by accident, profited from it. How many years had passed? Now, through Hamilton's hand, his political enemy's plan had reached Lorraine. As someone with inside knowledge, Lorraine looked at Hamilton with a strange look. Hamilton's attitude was also strange, ambiguous, lazy, and unclear, a stark contrast to the time he had introduced the revolving door to Lorraine. Lorraine closed the plan. "What? You changed sides. How can you smear someone's innocence?" Anyue pouted. "First of all, whether Federalists or Republicans, our political pursuit is to make America strong, prosperous, and the people happy. This is the basis for our cooperation. The situation has changed. America won the war and gained complete independence. The Continental Army is being disbanded. In contrast, the country's demand for the Navy is becoming stronger and stronger. Congress passed a proposal. In order to thank France for its help in the war, America's skilled craftsmen will go to England across the ocean and, under the influence of the world's strongest navy, use our golden hands to build a 2-deck gunboat tribute ship. Before we can truly master the battleship manufacturing technology, the once inappropriate naval revitalization plan has become the best transitional plan. What's more, even if we successfully master the battleship manufacturing technology, these investments will not be a loss. After all, a powerful battleship also needs a strong and capable wingman echelon. I guess you will want to ask why you were chosen next." Hamilton coughed lightly. Reason 1. The former Haight Shipyard conducted extensive research for America's maritime needs. Reason 2. The maritime group centered around Haight Shipyard is one of the best shipyards in America, and perhaps even the world. Reason 3. This promotional conference. It's said that when your invitation was sent to the Navy Department, they were discussing the fleet's composition. Lorraine listened quietly, and when Hamilton finished, she slowly, scratched her ears. "Well, that's a very good point. I want to hear the next version of the perfunctory answer." Tisk. Hamilton's face fell. He spat and said helplessly, "Well, just as you think, this proposal has nothing to do with us. Was it Governor Jefferson? He was indeed one of the driving forces, and the main one, but the main force was still those guys in the Navy Department. They used the above reasons to convince the president. And you know, even if we're not interested in expanding the Navy, neither Mr. Adams nor I can refuse the president's request. This should be the truth." But Lorraine still felt puzzled. "Even so, it seems that it is still not your turn, a person who knows nothing about the Navy, to be responsible for the inspection and negotiation of this business, because I volunteered." Hamilton smiled. "My comrades want me to sell you the Arc de Triomphe. This is a secret operation and has not been authorized. In fact, both Congress and the President believe that the Arc de Triomphe is far from being ready for release. They hope that we will be more cautious, but you have fully proved that it is the right choice to discuss with you in advance. You have allowed us to see the perspective of the consortium." Lorraine chuckled. "So you used our friendship to deceive your Navy Department, making them think that you will do your best to get more for them." "That's right." Hamilton had no shame on his face. "You are not their only candidate for a 5-year, £1 million order. They want a lot, but compared to what they want, they can't give much." "Well," Lorraine covered his chin and pondered, £1 million for 5 years, considering Drake's product system and America's needs, it is indeed not a sufficient budget." "I guess so. Although I don't understand the Navy, I still understand economics." "It doesn't matter." Lorraine knocked on the table. "What are the specific needs of the Navy Department?" "Needs?" Hamilton snatched the plan back from Lorraine, flipping through it left and right. "Here it is. 2 to 3 frigates, 8 destroyers, 20 frigates, and at least 50 communication ships. This is the skeleton of the new fleet in their minds. If everything goes well, they hope to complete the tribute ship within 2 years, and then deliver the first self-built battleship in 1790. It will be incorporated into this fleet and make it a reliable ocean shield for the United States." What a rich imagination. Lorraine quickly went over the fleet composition in his mind. 3 Valkyries, £80,000 each, £240,000. 3 second-generation aphrodisiacs, £35,000 each, £105,000. 5 first-generation aphrodisiacs, £25,000 each, £125,000. 8 brigs, £10,000 each, £80. 000, 12 brigantines, £4,000 each, £48,000. 20 large sloops, £2,000 each, £40,000, and 30 medium sloops, £800 each, £24,000. Based on the market prices quoted by the Maritime Group, the ship purchase cost alone for this formation would be over £660,000. Add in spare parts, maintenance, personnel, training, and ports. Even if the fleet didn't go out to sea, this £1 million wouldn't be enough for the Americans. This meant the Americans had to keep procurement costs down, especially the ship purchase, the bulk of the expense, to at least £500,000. However, if Lorraine wanted to equip all these ships, the manufacturing cost alone would exceed £470,000. He suddenly realized that this naval revitalization plan might not have been designed for the Maritime Group at all. The warships designed by Drake were good, but too expensive. Realizing this, Lorraine glared at Hamilton unhappily. Suddenly, he discovered something new and strange. Beneath Hamilton's indifferent attitude, he vaguely sensed a subtle, well-hidden nervousness. A second layer of perfunctory? Lorraine suddenly thought of this possibility. He frowned. "Alexander, I don't like this joke." Hamilton, as expected, showed a regretful expression. "Okay. It seems that Mr. Adams's luck has finally come to nothing, Mr. Adams." Hamilton suddenly became serious. "As you imagined, Drake, I used our friendship to deceive those idiots in the Admiralty into believing that I would work for their delusions, and thus snatched away this unnoticed opportunity to meet with you. But that was just the beginning. The Navy is important to us. We are short of budget. We, Mr. Adams and I, and other Federalists, love America and are willing to give everything we have for her." Hamilton suddenly changed the subject and quickly brought it back before Lorraine could react. "We all know that the contract offered by the Navy cannot impress you, but Mr. Adams consulted his advisors and learned that the ships of the Maritime Group are far beyond the mainstream classification. Your Valkyrie defeated 2 Navigator-class battleships in the Battle of Muscat, and the Lady also performed outstandingly, successfully delaying before you arrived. Is that right?" That's right, Drake is undoubtedly our best choice. Even if our attempt to control the battleship fails, your ship can give us the power to defend the country's maritime borders, but it is impossible for us to get more budget for the Navy to impress you. Therefore, Mr. It has privately prepared 2 sets of plans for me, 2 sets. The first set is to use the Arc de Triomphe to impress you and confirm the possibility of our future cooperation. If you are impressed, you may choose to compromise under the threat of the huge interests of the Arc de Triomphe. Although doing so is detrimental to the noble character of a gentleman, we believe that you will not let yourself lose money. At most, it will be unprofitable, Lorraine snorted. You are willing to sacrifice for America, but I have no obligation to sacrifice with you. What's more, I joined the Arc de Triomphe plan because of gold, appeal, and the mutual trust that I had paved with my life in the past. If you didn't give, you shouldn't expect a return, so Mr. Adams has prepared a second plan. Hamilton smiled bitterly. He will persuade the president to go north to inspect Boston's shipping and industrial systems. If possible, he hopes that Valkyrie can accompany him on this journey. Valkyrie can accompany him on this journey. The sound of cannons in the sky echoed in Lorraine's mind, making his eyes widen little by little. Leaking the president's whereabouts without reason and allowing armed merchant ships of foreign chambers of commerce to accompany him. John Adams, is he crazy? Chapter 509 Counterattack. Stern hit, Audrey's cry echoed across the deck of the Lady. Range 45, evade, ray, maintain evasive zigzag. Martelil, aim for the Mistral's mast, force her to slow, Pierce clutch the railing. Turner. Hasn't the foresail been trimmed yet? Hoist it immediately, we need to counterattack, Admiral. Too close, we can't, direct hit, boom. With a roar, the Mistral's 32-pound bow gun exploded on the Lady's port side of the poop. The drill referee immediately stepped forward and declared the upper left poop gun disabled, severely damaging 2 cabins on the poop. This was the 3rd shell the Lady had taken in 10 minutes. The maximum range was 70 meters, the minimum 30 meters. The Mistral's bow gun fired 7 rounds in pursuit, 3 of which hit, the first being a direct hit. Ray, despite all his might, was unable to shake off his foe. At this rate, the Lady's defeat was almost certain. Matilda ran to Pierce, her hand stained black with paint, causing his heart to tighten. Martelly, your hand, it was right in the destroyed gun bay, Martellia replied coldly. The gunner blocked the deadly paint for me, so it's ruled a severed arm. Pierce breathed a sigh of relief, then looked down to see a few drops of crimson blood mixed with paint dripping at Martellia's feet. Hey, it looks like you got more than just paint. Was it shrapnel? No, Martellia turned his arm over, revealing a long, fresh wound on the inside of his forearm, in a rare spot untouched by the paint. The stark contrast of red and white, the interweaving of flesh and skin, was strikingly glaring. The referee said my arm must have been completely blown off, and ordered me to remain unconscious for half an hour. I told him I could handle it, but he didn't believe me, so I cut myself right in front of him. That convinced him I could stay conscious. Are you sure he wasn't just scared by you? As long as the result is the same, his thoughts are unimportant, Pierce was convinced. Well, why don't you just run and bandage your wound? What's on your mind? The problem with the stern gun, Martellier said swiftly. The caliber of the upper 12-pounder is insufficient, and the firing angle of the lower 18-pounder is insufficient. The Mistral has a large number of gun shields on the bow, and the commander is directing the pursuit from the forecastle. They also separated the foremast rigging in advance, so they are not afraid that we will break the foremast. I plan to push 2 24-pounders to the upper deck and use the height there to throw the shells at the Mistral's foremast. Even if we can't break the foremast, we can bypass the gun shields and try to kill the pursuing commander. Push to the upper deck. Pierce looked at the narrow and winding aisle of the forecastle. How to push it? You can use the assault boat sling, but you need to push the forehand boom away. In other words, you have to temporarily sacrifice the forehand sail. I refuse. Pierce answered without thinking. In the current situation, Lay is already trying hard to avoid Mistral's bombardment. If we give up the assistance of the foresail, we will definitely not be able to avoid their bombardment. Pierce took a deep breath. Don't forget, by exchanging the Lady for Mistra, they are equivalent to winning, but we will lose even more miserably if we continue like this. Martinell frowned. The exercise judgment is too unfavorable to us. It will take at least 15 minutes for Turner to rearrange the foresail, and their artillery fire will only become more and more accurate. Pierce thought for a long time. "You just interfere with the shooting and adjust the target from the foremast to the bowgun compartment," he said. "You said before that they placed a pursuit commander on the bow deck, right? I'll deal with that person." The ship was shaking violently. Although the ladder on the mast was an orthodox hard ladder and felt solid and reliable when stepped on, the ship had been maintaining a semi-limited serpentine evasion, tilting from left to right, and then from right to left. Pierce's physical fitness and strength were only at the level of an ordinary human being. Climbing the mast under such conditions felt like strolling in a storm. It was so exciting. Pierce clung to the ladder, carrying 2 maritime commuter rifles on his back, holding the ladders tightly with both hands, and his feet swung left and right like flags. Zhao Sanmei, who was only 3 ladders away from him and followed closely at his feet, was terrified. In fact, Zhao Sanmei carried much more things than Pierce: 3 maritime commuter rifles, a spare Charleville with a longer range, special and fragile exercise musket bullets in her arms, and a more than 3-meter-long stabilization belt hung around her waist. The total weight of these things exceeded 20 kilograms. Zhao Sanmei climbed the ladder with them on her back. Not only did she still have strength left, she could even free up one hand to cover her mouth, preventing her screams from distracting Pierce's attention, while also being ready to lend a hand to help at any time. Trembling with fear and treading on thin ice, Pierce climbed the mizzen mast for a full 5 minutes, which usually took less than a minute to reach the top. During this time, the lady was hit by another shell, still from the right side of the stern. According to Redley's annoying judgment standard, he might have crossed out the mate's room deep in the stern from the list. Pierce finally climbed onto the lookout tower, nestled in the basket to catch his breath for a few times, and immediately took off his gun to make way for the platform. A slender hand rested on the edge of the platform. Zhao Sanmei didn't even look for the handle of the basket arm, and just pushed herself onto the platform. "Sanmei, reload!" Pierce shouted, tore off the tail end of the paper shell bullet with his mouth, and poured the propellant into the firing chamber. He only did this step because the front end of the paper shell bullet was sealed with a mixture of lead bullets and gunpowder, which had to be replaced by hand loading and filing with non-lethal training ammunition. After loading the propellant, Pierce handed the gun to Zhao Sanmei. Distance 70 to 100 meters, 2 spoons of chamber fire, 3 bullets, yet. The 2 men lowered their heads and got busy. In 3 minutes, 5 marine commuters and 1 Charleville were loaded and carefully compacted with cleaning rods. Pierce stood up, raised his gun and looked for his target. Zhao Sanmei knelt at his feet, fixed the stabilizing rope layer by layer to the belts on his waist and chest, locked the other end to the 4 sides of the lookout, tightened it, and tied it. Now, even if the ship capsized, the relative prohibition between Pierce and the lookout would not change in the slightest. He squinted his eyes, raised his gun, and his eyes swayed behind the layers of gun shields on the bow of the Mistra. "Sanmei, are the practice bullets safe?" "It uses a special gel technology. The foamed rubber bullets are not flammable, but they are very brittle and will break at the touch." The test report that came on board the bullet said that a total of 800 test shots were conducted, from 15 meters to 70 meters, with 9 shooting targets replaced, and it never succeeded in penetrating anything, including paper and skin. "Sounds really reliable." Pierce found the target, a strong woman waving her arms vigorously behind the gun shield, and beside her was a timid little man, with half a tricorn hat and gorgeous windbreaker shoulders visible from time to time. Judging from the color and style, it seems to be Drake's standard admiral uniform. Pierce also has one exactly the same. Speaking of which, Pierce was looking for the shooting angle. "Has Sanmei seen their Admiral Hanji?" "No," Zhao Sanmei thought for a while, "but I seem to have heard of him. If it's the same person, she has a very bad reputation in the junior school. I heard that when she sees more than 2 strangers or familiar people, she will be too shy to speak." "Is there such a person in our school?" Pierce exclaimed in surprise. Then he was relieved. "Although I'm curious, it's definitely not that one. How can such a shy person command a fleet?" Another hit, this time on the left side of the poop, staining a large area of black paint behind the lady's side, but judging by the location, it should be counted as a scratch. Zhao Sanmei asked curiously, "Master, don't you know Admiral Hanji? You have classes at the advanced school, it's shooting class." This guy was absent the whole semester. "I remember it very clearly." Pierce pursed his lips. "What is the firing rate of the training bullets?" "Less than 30%, Zhao Sanmei blurted out. "Most of them melted when they left the barrel, and only a few could leave the barrel. It's really low." Pierce adjusted the gun position helplessly. Anyway, 5 rounds of test firing. I will pinpoint the opponent's gun point, and you will be responsible for clearing the barrel and loading. Well, then, let's begin. Chapter 510 Unwilling. Wind strength, direction, wave height, current, and the angle and speed of the Grande Dame's stern sail before her. Countless data swirled into Valrhona's mind, constantly revising her prediction of the Grande Dame's course. When to steer, how many degrees, when to right, or not to right. In the age of sail, anticipating an opponent's sailing decisions was a fundamental skill every commander must master. Since it was fundamental, it certainly wouldn't be too difficult most of the time. After all, the speed of sail warfare was inherent. Even the extreme relative speed of 20 knots in high-speed close combat was only 36 kilometers per hour, 600 meters per minute, or 10 meters per second. This meant that a 2 to 3 minute attack or defense often required 10 to 20 minutes of preparation. As long as the approximate accuracy was accurate, both sides had ample time to make adjustments in their favor during movement and close combat. But fundamental skills also offered a wide range of applications. In certain situations, such as the current situation with the Mistral, stalking in dogfight mode, maintaining an average attack frequency of 1 round every minute and a half, and absolutely not allowing the opponent to draw a broadside, failure could result in a ship being sunk. Anticipation becomes the most challenging skill. It requires a vast amount of calculation, using all sorts of minute details to infer the target's likely movements. Then there's talent, the ability to instantly select the most likely options from a multitude of options. Then there's confidence, like the bomb disposal crew in later movies, the courage to cut off the one you believe is right from the red and blue lines. Finally, there's luck, leave the future to fate, enjoy success, and mitigate failure. Valrhona undoubtedly completed this exam perfectly. The 20-minute stalking battle involved 4 changes of direction, 13 feints, and the need to avoid a lady's return fire as much as possible. She guessed wrong only 3 times, and each time, she escaped the trap before the consequences could materialize. Never once did the Mistral enter the firing range of the noble lady's broadside guns. Perhaps Farnahanji was a divine gift bestowed upon the First Fleet. Everyone on board thought so. Sail billowed, waves pierced the waves. Amidst a turbulent bow, Farna crouched behind 3 layers of slats, her only remaining observation port keeping a close eye on the enemy. Ride, Anyue, standing beside her, wavered fiercely. Ride. Hold the sail, 5 degrees right, slowly, 5 degrees right, hold steady. The swiftly advancing Mistral turned slightly, creating a subtle angle with the noble lady ahead. Before the angle was clear, the noble lady, leaning to port, shuddered and, caught on the turbulent wind, cut straight to the starboard. The angle that hadn't yet appeared was smoothed out on the blink of an eye. Unlike the newly unstable lady's adjustments, the Mistral, having turned ahead, once again found a golden opportunity in its stable position. Range 50, relative speed 0.5 knots, straight ahead, Anne's voice trembled with excitement. Favrana, chance, bowgun, boom. Boom boom boom. Mistral's bowgun fired, and the lady's stern guns blazed simultaneously. The 2 shells crossed mid-air. Mistral's 2 shells hit, one of them colliding with a kink of the enemy's shield. The lady's jamming shot had a perfect lead, and the incoming shell, slightly sideways due to inertia, slammed into the Mistral's bowgun bay with a bang. The ship shook violently, and everyone on board was thrown to the ground. Favrana held on to the gun shield bracket. Direct hit. Anne. Casualties. Casualties. A sailor immediately ran down, only to return a moment later. It hit the hull outside the bowgun bay directly. Anne patted her chest and panted. But fortunately, the bowgun's curved gun port never opened. Only a small amount of pain was detected. It's ruled 3 hits, but the gun is intact. That's good. Fafnir stared motionlessly at the noblewoman's trajectory. Turn 5 more degrees, still to the starboard, okay, Anne responded. Just as she was about to give the order, she suddenly noticed a few strange colored stains on the nearby deck. What are these? Puzzled, she squatted down and brought a little stain to her nose. A unique, indistinguishable aroma, either sweet or pungent, mixed with a pungent smell of fish, pierced her nose, making Anne sneeze several times. Farna turned her head curiously. Anyue, what happened? It seems that some paint splashed onto the deck from the direct hit just now, splashed so high, who knows? Anne shrugged handsomely and stood up. Maybe it exploded in midair. If the NS project can be successful, such a shot can burn the pursuers to death. Yak, see use shrapnel bombs, Farna sighed with longing, and laid down to monitor the Lady Annie. The angle has widened. Turn the rudder. Oh, now. Right rudder 5. Bang. The gunshot came suddenly, and after a while, there were 2 more in succession. Bang. Bang. Anne's shoulder was hit hard by a sledgehammer, but before she could cry out in pain, she was hit hard in the chest again. Gunshot? What the hell is that? A referee, like a cloaked figure, suddenly emerged from the side, waving a small flag. Hit in the chest, left shoulder, declared dead instantly. No last words. This is hunting. No last words. Dead. Annie's final words were interrupted by physical force, and the living captain stood up in panic. At that moment. Bang. Bang. The captain's tricorn hat flew high. Fafnir frantically rubbed her buzzing forehead, feeling a pool of blood thick crimson through her fluffy hair. It was warm and pungent, smelling fishy. Declared dead in the forehead. Admiral Fafnir Hanji, killed. Killed? Killed means. A. At 11:45, with another round of Valkyrie gunfire in the open sea, the first live-fire confrontation exercise of the Drake fleet and the first product launch of the Maritime Group came to a close. The exercise lasted 2 hours and 45 minutes, with the Special Forces winning a bitter victory. At the viewing platform, British observers Colonel Collingwood and French observer Lieutenant Colonel Saubert, commissioned by Drake, replayed the short but intense simulated battle using diagrams. The presentations, each receiving a stipend of £200, were dedicated to revealing, to the audience, primarily from the Chamber of Commerce, subtle details about ship performance that laymen might not readily notice but were crucial for placing orders. At 9:22, the main lines of the 2 fleets crossed sides. Mistral suffered moderate damage, the Lady suffered minor damage, and the New Generation suffered minor damage. At 9:37, the 3 ships of the First Fleet intercepted the Sunflower. The Sunflower sank in battle and lowered its flag. At 9:50, the White Pelican joined the main line, threatening the Lady's passage. At 9:55, the First Fleet's main line suffered an organizational error, and the New Generation, codenamed Chapeau Gray, intercepted and supported the Lady. From that moment on, the battle was reversed. Mistral and Gray attacked and severely damaged the New Generation, forcing it to lower its flag. The Lady and the Future simultaneously attacked Brunhild, sinking it. Even the White Pelican, which bravely stepped forward to support it, was implicated and severely damaged, forcing both to lower their flags. At 10:22, the Special Forces Headless Ostrich was severely damaged in the stranglehold, lowering its flag. The 1st Division began to converge on the main force. However, by then, the Lady, having reorganized its foresail and survived its greatest crisis thanks to Freeman's heroic sacrifice, had gone on a killing spree. With the Future's wing, she sank the Puffin, Sea Sparrow, Oleander, and Hydrangea, and severely damaged the Fregatebird, Dark Champagne, and the Lady. At 11:04, the Lady was declared sunk while attacking the Lady, but even then, the 1st Division was powerless. At 11:37, the Mistral was decapitated after being penetrated by the Noble Lady's ammunition magazine. The ship was declared sunk and its flag was lowered. The only surviving Merlin withdrew from the battle zone, abandoning the battle. At 11:45, the chief referee, the Valkyrie, declared the battle over. The White Special Service Fleet secured victory, with only the Noble Lady escaping. Overall, Lorraine's attempt to demonstrate the Drake design system in combat was an unprecedented success. In this brief battle, the speed of the Delicate Flower class, the versatility of the Seabird class, the balance of the 1st-generation Servant, the power of the 2nd-generation Servant, and the Valkyrie class's dominance in the Sub-Patrol class were fully demonstrated. Although there were special orders and land auctions scheduled for the evening, many customers were tempted by the 3 free maintenance packages offered with on-site orders and signed purchase contracts with the Maritime Group sales representatives. A total of 32 Delicate Flower-class brigantines, 14 Seabird-class brigantines, and 3 first-generation servants were sold. Surprisingly, Lorraine had ordered 2 second-generation servant gods from a powerful ally of the Beishang Union, revealing the commercial potential of this small main battleship, priced far above a typical destroyer. The colorful cast dragged their exhausted bodies back to port. Mistra, her hull riddled with shrapnel, and the noble woman, her buttocks pierced with scrap metal, dropped anchor together. As the planks were lowered, aggrieved Fafnir, comforted by Anne, listlessly disembarked from the ship. From a distance, she spotted Catalina, who greeted them in a wheelchair. Fafner's grief cascaded upon seeing Catalina, and she burst into tears, stumbling into Catalina's arms like a lost fawn. Degrees. Miss Katerina. We lost, my dear, my dear. Katerina gently stroked Fafner's head. Feeling the clot of dried paint, she instantly understood the reason for the First Fleet's sudden breakdown in command during the battle. She glared at Pierce, who had just disembarked, then lowered her head to pick up Fafner's little head, nuzzling into her eyes, staring into her watery eyes. It was just a minor failure. Success needs failure to nourish it, but, TT, to help me integrate the fleet, you neglected your own injuries and forced yourself out of the hospital early. To shorten my adjustment period, you taught me so many techniques for commanding a fleet. I won't accept this. I won't accept this. Ah, the cries of the goddess of victory echoed through the anchorage of Jackdaw Town. Pierce, brows bowed, hunched over his deck, bathed in hundreds of condemning, mocking glances. That little girl who looks about 13 or 14 is really Fafna Hanji? Really? Really, Freemany? What's that look in your eyes? I had no idea my opponent was such a tiny thing. Third sister can vouch for me. Hey, third sister, don't go. Hey. Chapter 511 Unpleasant. 1785, Sunny. Pierce lay on the deck like a puddle of mud, basking in the sun, his brows etched with the word wretched in layers of capital letters. The Miami auction night concluded successfully, and Lorraine's bundled marketing campaign was a resounding success. The auction totaled over 840,000 British pounds. A second-generation Serenity-class ship, with lifetime free maintenance, fetched 43,700 British pounds as the highest-priced ship. A 6-story building with 2 dedicated berths within the Miami Beach Newport area fetched a whopping 13,000 British pounds as the highest-priced land parcel. Following the auction, Carmen released over 20 prime plots of land on ancillary buildings within 15 days. The second phase of the Miami Beach Newport was declared complete on November 5, and plans for the third phase were released on November 7. Lorraine was also busy. On November 10, he and the Florida governorate held a joint press conference at Miami's Municipal Gardens, announcing that, with the full support of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, the governorate would hold a groundbreaking ceremony for a coastal defense camp on Virginia Island after New Year's Day 1786. Construction of the Bay of Biscay garrison would officially begin after the groundbreaking ceremony. Sir Tussula solemnly promised that the governorate would complete the deployment of all coastal batteries within a year, fully safeguarding navigation in the Bay of Biscay. This wave of favorable conditions continued to boost Miami's land prices, soaring 160% between October 15 and November 15 alone. Compared to Lorraine's investment in land acquisition and development, the highest premium in Miami now reached 47 times, with an average premium exceeding 16 times. Miami became the new darling of the Americas, with the entire New World embracing its promise and vitality. Merchants flocked to the vast, tranquil Bay of Biscay. Yet, at this very moment, a dejected fleet left its anchorage and sailed upstream, Pierce's special service, fresh from a victorious confrontation exercise. It was a sad story. In an exercise focused on ships and showcasing the capabilities of gunboats, Pierce's world-class marksmanship skills turned the tide, single-handedly reversing the outcome. No one thought Pierce's actions were wrong. However, putting aside Pierce's personal achievements, the Special Service's performance in this battle was indeed far inferior to that of the newly formed First Service. Lorraine's post-battle review was perhaps the most pertinent. He stated that the Special Service had 2 shining moments, a sudden change of formation, which cost the life of Vice Admiral Dillon, and a second, a change of enemy fire, which cost the life of First Admiral Freemany. The Vice Admiral's life was repeatedly sacrificed in the fleet's quest for the upper hand. This was certainly not the fault of any single individual or single command. The entire Special Service should be ashamed and reflect on this. To properly punish the Special Service, Pierce was given an exceptionally demanding mission. They were to depart on November 8 and reach Barbados within 10 days, escorting a 40-ship merchant caravan bound for Europe, a journey that would take approximately 33 days. They would arrive in Southampton around December 20, where they would spend a brief Christmas holiday before escorting another large caravan to Cape Town on January 4. Their third escort mission awaited them in Cape Town, departing from Cape Town to Havana on March 13. This infamous voyage would last a full 6 months, With a maximum of 2 days rest in Barbados, around 14 in Southampton, and less than 5 in Cape Town, Pierce was filled with resentment, almost overflowing. He couldn't tell whether it stemmed from Lorraine's displeasure with his recent laziness or from Catalina's displeasure at him for hitting Valrhona and making her cry. Either way, it was resentment. Dylan drifted over to Pierce. "Admiral, the Seamen's Union just submitted a protest, saying they spent last year's Christmas on the ship and deserve compensation for this Christmas." Pierce smacked his face from the deck. "How are they going to compensate?" Before setting sail, they contacted 14 unions in Miami and learned that the Chamber of Commerce's average Christmas holiday in Miami this year is 22 days. They're demanding a 50% increase to 33 days. If work must be arranged during the holiday, they need to pay double the compensation on top of their regular salary, which means triple pay, demanding 33 days of vacation and triple pay when they know we're only resting in Southampton for 14 days. That's pretty much it. Pierce scrambled up from the deck with a hiss. Who initiated this protest? Newland Gary Flan, the bosun of the future, is the initiator. He has a 15% proposal promotion team under him, 2 of whom are sailors from the Lady. How many of these 16 have long-term contracts? 4, and Newland Gary Flan is one of them. Pierce tutted softly. "You know, Dad, brother, the captain originally wanted to promote the establishment of a general labor union this year, so he induced those unions to prepare many plans. Who knew that the planned strike hadn't even started yet, and the Miami matter was suddenly put on the agenda?" Sister Carmen was suddenly very busy, but the union movement that had been prepared for several months couldn't be stopped just like that. So the first strike started a few days before the actual combat exercise last month. "Do you know how Sister Carmen persuaded them to stop?" Old Dylan blinked. "Fire 1 or 2, and then give the striking unions a little bit of sweetness." "Totally wrong," Pierce shrugged. "Sister Carmen spent 15 minutes meeting with the strike representatives, and she agreed to their proposal without even listening to their statements. Then, she fired all the union representatives of the 3 unions participating in the strike. All? Yes, regardless of whether they participated in the strike or not, as long as they were registered representatives, they were all dismissed according to regulations, and they were all paid liquidated damages within 24 hours and left." She didn't even bother to find a reason. She just said that they interfered with the progress of important affairs of the Chamber of Commerce and failed to fulfill their responsibility to connect the 2 sides. Dylan opened his mouth speechlessly. "Is this asking the remaining unions to wait until after the new year? To be precise, we will play the strike trick after the asset management company lifts the first level of combat readiness. Before that, Sister Carmen will not accompany you." "Oh, are you telling me this is your plan?" "We will arrive in Barbados tonight," Pierce said. "Tell them that I accept the union's initiative in full, and then immediately kick those 16 self-righteous idiots off the ship. And give them as much compensation as they deserve, and we will never delay it until sunrise tomorrow." "What's the reason?" "The reason? Tell them that I'm unhappy, the kind that can't be appeased." Pierce shook his sleeves angrily. "Brother is absolutely right. The atmosphere in the Special Forces formation is too lax, and there is an extreme lack of ambition and centripetal force. If we don't correct it, we will become a disgrace to the direct fleet. These people are the first to be cut. P.S. Wretched, both pitiful and despicable." Chapter 512 Rebirth I, The Great Adventure. Ling. Ling. The weak ringing of a bell awoke Raoul from his half-sleep. Mom. It's not even dawn yet," he mumbled, trying to turn over, but suddenly felt heavy. Something was pressing against his stomach, squeezing him and making him unable to move. He tried to push, but his arm reached out and pushed against a large, warm, furry ball. The ball echoed like her little sister. "Brother. Stop shaking me. It hurts." "Ah. It's Sophia." His memory returned. Raoul's name was Raoul Bacern, a 10-year-old Spanish man. He had lived with his parents and 6-year-old sister, Sophia, in the Viscount of Zona, just outside Barcelona. Although he was a freeman, his farm's output was barely enough to cover the annual taxes for his family of 4. As far as he could remember, he had never made any free decisions. His so-called freedom was merely a symbol on his household registration. Raoul's father was a farmer and a stonemason for the Viscount's family, and his mother was a farmer and a cook for the Viscount's family. Raoul had been carrying fodder in the Viscount's dairy stable since childhood. Sophia was lovely and had been learning to be a good maid since she was 4. But that life changed 2 months ago. At dinner, his father, having a rare drink, suddenly announced to the family after the pre-meal prayers that he had traded the family's 20-acre farm for 4 tickets to the New World. They would journey to the distant shores of the ocean, where His Majesty the King had founded a new town called Miami. There, free from the greed of nobles, even the humblest freemen could eat food grown in their own fields. And then, they boarded the immigrant ship, the Mayflower, crammed into a cabin just over 10 square meters with 6 other families, allowed out only half an hour each day. A feeble bell signaled the arrival of the midnight hour, heralding the start of a new day. Today, it must be the 33rd day, Raoul muttered, shifting his hips. A tingling sensation spread like needles through his body, making him gasp in pain. But he really had no right to complain. The cabin was incredibly crowded, and to give the children more room to rest, the men had divided the small cabin into 7 sections. Raoul's family occupied a corner near the hull, with their own porthole. On a clear day, Raoul and Sophia could even bask in the sun for an hour or two. But precisely because they had the porthole all to themselves, their deck was half the size of the other families. Dad slept, seated like a city wall between 2 large bags. Mom's body rested against the rough bulkhead, Raoul lay on her lap, and Sophia used his flat belly as a pillow. Only in this way could the precious little space fit the 4 of them. Mom hadn't lain down to rest in days. Raoul thought, stroking Sophia's fluffy hair, and suddenly his eyes lit up. Sunrise? He opened his eyes in surprise, seeing a gentle golden light streaming through the small porthole. It was indeed the rising sun. But hadn't the bell just rung? The bell only rang at midnight, the sun shouldn't have risen so soon. Could the bell have meant something else? Was the ship wrecked? Were there pirates? Or, docked? Thinking of docking, Raoul sat up with a jerk. The sudden movement startled his mother awake, and Sophia's tiny body was thrown, slamming into Dad's back with a yelp. Dad fell forward, headbutting the neighbor's sister. The sister, believing she was being molested, screamed, dragging everyone in the cabin awake. What's wrong? What's wrong, Dad? Mr. Bachran tried to kiss me. What, Tuka? This is a misunderstanding, you despicable pervert. Explain to God. I told you it was a misunderstanding. Sophia bumped into me. Brother, you hurt me. Wow, pandemonium erupted. Seeing his father about to be grabbed by the neighbor, Mr. Tuka, Raoul somehow summoned up the courage and threw his hands between the 2 grown men. Mr. Tuka, Dad, the sun's up. Tuka paused his fist in midair, his teeth gnashing. What's so strange about a sunrise? Little Raoul, get out of the way. Your father must pay for his actions, but the bell rang just a few minutes ago. The bell rang, and the sun came out. Huh? The bell rang, and the sun came out. January 2nd, 1786. It was a sunny day. The Mayflower docked in the new harbor of Miami Beach after a 32-day voyage. Holding his sister's hand, Raoul stepped off the plank in confusion. Before him lay a bustling port bustling with people. From north to south, a long stone embankment stretched along the coastline. Every few dozen meters, a wide stone boardwalk branched out to sea, some 40 or 50 meters long, some 200 or 300 meters. Miami Beach's mooring conditions were excellent. The Atlantic side faced the wind, offering dozens of kilometers of shallow sandy beaches. The Bay of Biscay side was leeward, with deep, even waters. Only a short boardwalk was needed to accommodate large ships. This is the gift that enabled Miami Beach to expand to its current size in just a few years. Lorraine has designated a vast port area along the Bay of Biscay. The old port is located across from the river mouth, flanked by land for a planned cross-sea bridge and ferry terminals connecting the 2 sides. To the north lies the new port, fully completed last November, and to the south lies the 3rd phase of the commercial port, which is also under construction. Newcomers to the area didn't understand the reasoning, they were simply astonished. Here, the vast white stone pier stretches as far as the eye can see, flanked by a smooth seawall dotted with flower beds. Next to the seawall is a broad, palm-lined promenade, and on the other side are rows of colorful buildings of varying heights. Most of the new port area has been sold, but given its recent operation, only about 1/3 of it is complete, with much more still under construction. But the bustling construction scene was even more stimulating than the bustling commercial scene. Construction crews, material trucks, mountains of materials lining the road, the densely packed docks. Raoul nervously tugged at his father's sleeve, cowering behind the adults. Dad, didn't you say that His Majesty the King only recently built Miami? His father's mouth dropped open, a blank expression on his face. The Herald did say Miami was only built last year by the Florida governorate. Honey, Barcelona's port doesn't have so many ships. Mom was no more calm than the children. Barcelona is still more prosperous than here. Dad seemed to be trying to convince Mom, but more to convince himself. I went to Barcelona 2 years ago. It wasn't as crowded as here, but the docks there are much larger, so Barcelona is so prosperous. Mom breathed a sigh of relief, unsure what part of the conversation had reassured her. Honey, what should we do next? Dad was stunned. According to information he'd gathered in Spain, upon arriving in a new town, immigrants should immediately go to the city hall to register as naturalized citizens. Local officials would then take them to their new homes and arrange for them to farm. If the local environment was harsh, adult men might even receive weapons, undergo uniform military training, and participate in slave hunting, bandit suppression, or patrols to defend the town. In short, their goal should be clear: to get to the city hall. The problem was, Dad had always assumed Miami was just an ordinary town, close to the sea, with perhaps 2 or 3 boardwalks forming a pier, a log wall, and 400 or 500 residents. No matter where you stood, you could see the city hall and the church. Who knows what to do? Mom, we have to go find the pilot. Little Sophia's voice broke the unspeakable awkwardness. The bearded sailor uncle told me that the pilot would give us a map with the way to the immigration office drawn on it. Immigration office? Raoul looked at his sister strangely. Sophia, what is the immigration office? It's a good place where houses and land can be conjured up. That's what the bearded sailor uncle said. Is it a good place? Raoul looked at his father inquiringly, and his mother looked at him with the same look. Dad, dear, anyway, let's go and take a look. Dad carried the luggage and smiled bitterly. We have no way out. If we encounter danger. Raoul, take your sister and run, okay? P.S. The third small theater, Rebirth. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513 Rebirth II, A Boy's Fantasy. The uneasiness of leaving home, the uncertainty of a new arrival, the unfamiliar streets, the throngs of people, and the strange, indistinguishable accents lingering in the air. Raoul walked hand in hand with his sister along the beautiful coastal boulevard, but the excitement and joy he had felt at the sunrise were long gone. His father's words lingered in his mind. We have no escape. If we run into danger. Raoul, take your sister and run. Run, where to? Raoul looked up, crossed the street, and saw a small, thin figure flash past the red and white houses across the street. He must have been one of the legendary Indians, with skin a lighter yellow than that of the Moors, yet darker than that of the Spaniards. He was about 13 or 14, dressed in loose linen clothes, his face painted with a bright oil paint, his mouth filled with an unknown variety of dried meat, and he was pushing a cart laden with wooden planks. He felt Raoul's gaze, stopped, turned, and smiled broadly at him, revealing a row of white teeth. Raoul was startled. The moment he saw that smile, Raoul's mind suddenly flashed back to horror stories about Indian cannibals. Combined with the jerky in the Indian boy's mouth, Raoul felt that smile was like a wolf seeing a lamb. He was going to eat us. Raoul's hands suddenly tightened, and little Sophia groaned in pain. She struggled to free herself from her brother's clutches, and terrified, she burrowed into her mother's arms. Brother, you're hurting me again, Sophia. Raoul bit his lip, ultimately keeping his judgment to himself. Sophia, I'm sorry. Brother was distracted. Well, I forgive you. The family continued walking, following the map they had obtained from the pilot. They turned right at a green-walled building with a centaur sculpture in front of it, and soon arrived at a fountain square. Directly north of the square was the neighborhood's chapel, a pastor preaching in front of it. To the south stood a modest 3-story building, unassuming and unassuming. Over the Romanesque foyer hung a sign, Drake Chamber of Commerce Immigration and Resettlement Agency. It was in English, with Spanish, French, and Portuguese translations underneath. Concerned, Mom grabbed Dad and asked, Honey, are we in the wrong place? The map definitely points here. Unless there's another fountain square with a chapel near the dock, but the Drake Chamber of Commerce, I don't know, Dad said, putting down his luggage in distress. Logically, that immigration agency should be a government agency, So we must be in the wrong place, right? Dad, I'll go ask. Raoul radiated with an aura of selfless dedication, his fervor leaving his parents completely baffled. Raoul, I'll go ask, he said firmly. This town, if only Dad can protect Sophia, go. Chief Snapsco, this is a comparison of the average daily resettlement volume since January and last November and December. The sweet-looking immigration clerk stood beside Flamin, holding a thick stack of forms. Starting in January, the tax and household registration departments set up service windows in the agency, and it's been very effective. And then there's the land lottery system, which started last December. The average daily resettlement volume in December increased by 17% compared to November, and another 11% over the past 2 days. The temporary resettlement site in the port area was already empty by Christmas. Unless there are special family circumstances, new immigrants arriving in Hong Kong are generally resettled on the same day, and the feedback from all sides is very positive. Thank you, Flamin nodded, his fingers brushing the back of the clerk's hand as he took the documents. A blush crept into the clerk's face, but she didn't move her hand away. The corners of Flamin's mouth curled up, and he glanced at the clerk's name tag, Ms. Vivian. Yes, I heard that in order to cooperate with this immigration resettlement work, the Immigration Bureau declined Ms. Xavier's proposal for rotation leave, and only took a half-day break on Christmas Eve. Did they give up the Christmas and New Year's Day holidays? Yeah, Vivian nodded. This is an initiative of the union, and I voted in favor when it was voted on. What a kind girl. Flamin smoothed down Vivian's hair at the temples. You've worked hard during this period. You must not have had any rest, right? Even your hair has become dry. Vivian's face suddenly turned red to the roots of her neck. I wash my hair every day. I'm talking about rest. Flamin frowned. Lack of rest is the natural enemy of a lady. Even for me, you shouldn't hurt your beauty, but the temporary resettlement site in the port area can only meet the most basic survival guarantees. Ms. Xavier said that if we work one more hour, the new immigrant's sense of identity with Miami and Drake will increase a few points. My Vivian, your heart is as soft as an angel. Her stern face softened, and the hand stroking her hair naturally touched her face. Flamin held Vivian's face and guided her to look him in the eye. I can't stop you from dedicating yourself to Miami, but the immigration wave is about to end. Ms. Xavier said that the first-level combat readiness will be lifted on January 15th. By then, my family has a small villa by the lake in Pansy Manor. There's a small herd of deer nearby, and I often see deer playing in the flower fields in the yard. Because they've never been driven away, they're not afraid of people. Vivian's eyes sparkled. If you like animals, too, maybe we can. Bang! At the crucial moment that would make the final decision, the door of the Immigration Bureau was slammed open. In the daylight, a ragged Spanish teenager gasped as he maintained the posture of pushing the door open, his momentum as fierce as Moses trying to split the Red Sea. Cunning Englishman. I ask you, where have you hidden the real immigration department? Guards, fork out. Falamon's face darkened after his spell was interrupted. He was a popular figure in Miami, known to every Drake employee working there. He was favored by both the young Vice President Artis and the powerful manager Xavier, and his future was limitless. So, even in theory, he was just one of a dozen section chiefs in the real estate management department of the asset management company, solely responsible for liaising with immigration affairs. He had no hierarchical relationship with the immigration department, and had no authority to command the staff. His orders even conflicted with the director's directive to make guests feel at home. But if he said fork out, the boy would not be carried out. Two burly guards swung their batons and approached Raoul with a grin. Poor little Raoul was terrified. But his brotherly responsibility to his sister sustained him. The image of the cunning English villain and the cannibalistic Indian boy warned him, and he had no way to retreat. England. Even if you take me as a white slave, even if you let the Indians eat me, I will hand over the real immigration office. Our immigration office, crack. Two batons, one on each side, slid under his armpits and crossed behind his back. The guards effortlessly raised their arms, and the thin Raoul was impaled high in the air. The terrified boy kicked his legs wildly. What are you doing? Let me go. I won't die. God will punish you. Spaniards will never be slaves. Never. Squeak. Hey. Whoosh. Snap. Squeak. A moist sea breeze swept through the streets of Miami. The boy lay prone on the stone pavement outside the immigration office, his body flat on the ground, his body still. An unknown leaf swirled and landed on the back of his head, gently pressing down on his short, slightly curly dark brown hair. A sense of relief welled up in Raoul's heart. Amidst those mocking, curious, and worried gazes, he reassured himself that if he didn't move, the leaves would surely bury him. He heard footsteps. Because his shy head was completely pressed against the stone slab, the rustling footsteps sounded especially clear. He heard his sister's voice, "Mom, why is my brother lying on the ground? Did he make those two bearded uncles angry? Can Sophia go and apologize?" Chapter 514 Rebirth III. Welcome to Miami. Mr. Bocaron, welcome to Miami. As Raoul was swiftly and decisively thrown out of the immigration office hall like a troublemaker, the Bocaron family's misunderstandings and anxieties receded considerably. Freemen were undeniably considered the lower class in Spanish mainland. While their freedom afforded them legal protections regarding human rights, the powerful and wealthy would at least exercise restraint in public, refraining from lynching them, compared to the even lower class of bankrupts. However, this limited respect only applied to so-called public spaces. More realistically, churches, chapels, memorial squares, and royal palaces. They were accustomed to bullying and endurance. Raoul had even prepared himself for being eaten for this door-blocking tantrum. While this was partly a youthful act of loyalty and fantasy, it was more a reflection of their class-based perspective on life. Unexpectedly, the Drakes simply threw him out, without insults, without beatings, without selling him to slave traders, and certainly without handing him over to cannibalistic Indians. After the pilot personally drew the map for them, the Bocaron family felt Miami's tenderness for the second time, a feeling of shame, yet also of flattery. Father and mother, completely letting down their guard, held Raoul's head and once again entered the immigration office, intending to apologize to the Englishman inside and earnestly inquire for the address of the real immigration office. Then, after Mr. Bocaron explained his purpose and identity, they were led by guards to Vivian and Flamin. "My carriage will be waiting for you by the fountain in the garden square at 10 a.m. on January 15th, Miss Vivian. I look forward to it, Mr. Section Chief." Miss Vivian spoke shyly in English. Although her father couldn't understand, he could still vaguely smell the sour stench of passionate love. He was struggling with whether to approach and interrupt, weighing whether interrupting their love conversation would lead to him repeating his son's mistake and being kicked out. While he was still hesitating, Vivian, on the other hand, put on an impeccable business smile. "Mr. Bocaron, welcome to Miami." "Ah. Thank you, I'm sorry. Dad was flustered and slapped Raoul on the back of the head. "Boy, apologize? No need." Vivian spoke fluent Spanish. "Spain and Great Britain have a touching history. We can understand the vigilance in the child's heart. After all, you only see that Drake is a British Chamber of Commerce. It is human nature to have preconceived ideas." Dad was so moved that he was about to cry. "Well, Mom, we just came from the countryside, and the people on the boat told us to go to the immigration office. We didn't know the Miami Chamber of Commerce had its own immigration office, so, there's only one," Vivian interrupted with a smile. "The entire Miami area, including all the mountains, water, land, and islands on both sides of the Bay of Biscay, is legally owned by the Drake Chamber of Commerce. Resettling immigrants requires land. On private land, such a matter certainly shouldn't be led by City Hall, at least not entirely, so this is Miami's real immigration office. Apart from this, all other offices in the city claiming to handle immigration matters are illegal. Even if they were official, they're still illegal officials." "Illegal, official?" Dad's eyes sparkled. With his common sense, he couldn't fathom how an official who makes laws could be illegal. And why did His Majesty insist on establishing a town on British land? Couldn't he have established it elsewhere? Did His Majesty own all of Florida? Wasn't Miami in Florida? Vivian completely lost herself in shopping guide mode. With a blush still lingering, she nodded, lifted her skirt, and curtsied to the Bocaron family. "Mr. Bocaron, the Drake Chamber of Commerce thanks you for choosing Miami as your second home. Our agency, guided by the principle of customer first, will provide you with immigration services that will make you feel at home. We believe that before long, your hometown will become a faint mark deep in your soul. Only here is it worth your all." Tears welled up in her father's eyes. Little Sophia tugged at her mother's sleeve, her voice soft and tender. "Mom, are we being sold?" Unlike other colonial towns, Miami established a unique separation of property rights and administration from its founding. This characteristic distinguishes Miami in many ways, perhaps most significantly the commercial immigration process designed by Carmen Xavier and supplemented by Lorraine Drake. Compared to immigration procedures in other towns, Miami's is undoubtedly complex, yet it is also formal, fair, and law-abiding. Like the foundation stone of a town, Miami's distinctive integrity and stability were evident from its inception. The first step in this process is naturalization. Last year, new immigrants had to first take a ferry to the Bayou Town City Hall, provide proof and register their information to the household registration office there, thereby canceling their old household registration and obtaining a new local household registration. This year, at the initiative of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, the Household Registration Office added a dedicated naturalization window in the Chamber's Immigration Office lobby, finally eliminating the arduous commuting back and forth across the Bay of Biscay. They can complete the various procedures for canceling their household registration and naturalizing their naturalization directly at the Immigration Office, then proceed directly to the second step, purchasing land. The Drake Chamber of Commerce is promoting the commercialization of real estate throughout Miami. The elite team at Xavier House labels each piece of land, each with a unique coefficient. Any adjustment to the benchmark price will adjust land prices across Miami year on year, meaning Drake doesn't have free land. However, pioneers often come from impoverished backgrounds, having left their homes in search of new homes because they could no longer make a living there. Profiting from them is unrealistic. Lorraine and Carmen clearly understand their value to Miami, knowing that their greatest value lies in their popularity, manpower, future prospects, and the council votes granted by their household registration. The struggle for the settlers was a struggle for control of Miami, and Lorraine personally devised a Miami-style self-purchased land system. The Immigration Department had 4 land purchase windows, one for commercial properties and mansions priced over 10,000 gold, another for apartments priced in the thousands, and finally for fertile land priced in the hundreds. Those who couldn't afford anything went to the last window, where land was randomly allocated by lottery. The Bachland family, of course, fell into the last category. After completing the naturalization procedures, Vivian consulted the family of 4 and quickly directed them to the lottery window. Miami now has 6 districts: the Estuary District, which is the administrative center, Miami Beach, which is the trade center, the College District, which is the cultural and educational center, the Virginia Island Mouth District, the Cheyenne District, which is the agricultural center, and the Jackdaw District, which is not accepting immigration applications for the time being. Except for the Jackdaw District, immigrants can freely choose where to settle down, but only the Cheyenne District enjoys immigration subsidies. Dad blinked. Subsidies? Yes, in the 9 villages and 3 townships of the Cheyenne District, if immigrants give up their own choice, they can randomly obtain 10 acres of fertile land. A large tent that can accommodate 8 people, 2 octagonal gold coins and a quota of 300 kilograms of potatoes per person. The last 3 subsidies are the welfare policies given by the Drake Chamber of Commerce to new immigrants. The fertile land is in the form of transactions. The Drake Chamber of Commerce will sell the land to immigrants at market prices. The transaction costs will be borne by the Chamber of Commerce, and the transaction tax will be borne by the immigrants. Tax? Dad was nervous. Vivian's face showed regret. Miami's land transaction tax is 10% of the transaction amount, both ways. The Chamber of Commerce pays the seller's portion, and immigrants pay the buyer's portion. We've tried hard to get City Hall to waive the relevant transaction tax to ease the burden on new immigrants. But City Hall seems to have misunderstood our good intentions. Transactions must be taxed, and so must we. Trapped in a web, unable to extricate myself. I've encountered a minor setback, but I hope I can get through it safely. Updates will undoubtedly be affected during this process, but I'll do my best to maintain a single update. Please forgive me if I'm forced to stop. Chapter 515, Rebirth IV, Pansy Country. Free land purchases mean the Drake Chamber of Commerce provides immigrants with special resettlement funds, which are used to fully offset the land purchase costs paid to the landowner and the Drake Chamber of Commerce. This legal land transaction facilitates the transfer of land ownership. From an economic perspective, this approach is even worse than taking off your pants to fart. The Drake Chamber of Commerce's money passes through the immigrant's hands, and when it returns to the Drake Chamber of Commerce, not only does the amount not increase, but due to the transaction, a 10% tax deduction is required, resulting in a loss of land. However, Lorraine still demands the utmost legality from the Immigration Bureau. Special grants must be collected, and land selection and purchases must be documented. Even if it's just a formality, it must be accompanied by a significant role, bearing the weight of life's unbearable weight, so that the immigrants, who have endured poverty all their lives, can truly feel the Drake Chamber of Commerce's kindness and dedication. Dad felt this all firsthand. Under Miss Vivian's attentive guidance, the family, trembling with fear, held their cups of fragrant coffee and watched eagerly as Raoul, on behalf of the Bakran family, conducted the sacred drawing of lots. The young man reached into the pristine white ballot box before him, resisting the relentless suction, and with sweaty hands, he plucked the piece of wood that felt most suitable from the pile. Elk Woodland, number 17, he read the words on the wooden sign, emphasizing each word. Vivian solemnly took it and repeated with a smile, "It's Elk Grove." The village is nestled against a dense forest, home to a herd of elk and a friendly group of Indians. There's a small lake to the west, and less than 10 kilometers to the east is Mailang Township, the district seat of Cheyenne District. It's a first-rate place among the 9 villages and 3 townships. Raoul's eyes sparkled, just like his father's. Really, Mom, a shopping guide's job is to present Miami to customers as it truly is. We don't lie, and the quality of the land is a special gift from God. Vivian handed the license plate to the window and exchanged it for the deed and transaction documents. Elk Grove 17, 10 acres, close to the village, flat, 300 feet from the stream, land grade B, estimated value 90 octagonal gold coins. It's a truly wonderful place. She set down the documents and handed the heavy bag of gold coins to her father, who took it with trembling hands. "Ms. Vivian, is this money? Didn't I tell you? It's relocation compensation from the Chamber of Commerce for immigrants. It's 92 gold coins in total. 90 for the land purchase, and 2 for living expenses. The remaining potatoes will be delivered to your tent. It's already set up on your land, but it might need some cleaning, and there might not be enough beds for a family of 4. Thank you, you're welcome," Vivian said with a charming smile. Drake has an obligation to make the people of Miami feel cared for and warmed. It's a God-given responsibility. Now, please, Mr. Bakran, handle the land purchase procedures. The 90 gold coins clattered out, and the heavy purse quickly lightened. The flowing gold gave Dad a particularly solid feeling, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of having settled down, having purchased a home. He solemnly signed his initials on the land purchase contract. And the officer handed him a tax bill with 9 octagonal gold coins on it. Dad was stunned for a moment. "Isn't this a subsidy?" Vivian pointed to the side tax window. "Mr. Bakran, the taxes are paid. According to City Hall's requirements, you can only receive your land deed with a tax payment certificate." It was like falling from heaven to hell. 100 gold coins, piled high, were gone before they could even warm up. Facing the tax collector's arrogant and harsh face, Dad timidly withdrew his only pistole from his savings, added an octagonal gold coin, and with tears in his eyes, received the tax payment certificate that symbolized his new life. "Mr. Bakran, Miami welcomes you." Echoing the beginning and the end, Vivian presented the land deed with Miami's sincere welcome to its citizens. Dad could clearly feel the warmth contained in the deed. In the same hall, the glacier and hot spring corresponded, the difference between Drake and Spain. The Bakran family constantly lost and gained and lost and gained again. Their wealth and their spirits were tossed like a sailboat in a storm. The moment they broke free from the wind, what remained in their hearts was not the greed of the aristocracy or the indifference of the civil servants, but the vibrant pansy in full bloom on the Drake Club emblem. "How beautiful," Mom exclaimed, stroking the deed. Vivian thoughtfully escorted them out of the immigration office. "Mr. Bakran, although Miami is called a town, it's the size of a city. To get from Miami Beach to Elk Grove, you first need to cross the Bay of Biscay and then follow the signs for about 80 kilometers. Dad's mood plummeted again. "The Drake Club understands your difficulties. Unlike other places, we have ample public transportation here. It's more widespread than in London. In Spain, you've probably never seen these buses and boats serving ordinary citizens." Vivian stroked little Sophia's head. "Go straight west and you'll see a currency exchange office on the side of the road, which offers gold, silver, and penny exchange services. British pennies are the main change in Miami, and I suggest you exchange some. After all, public transportation doesn't accept reals and copper pesos." Once you have exchanged the pennies, you can find a cross-sea ferry nearby with a pansy flag flying. It runs every hour and costs 2 pence per adult and 1 penny per child. Children as old as your daughter can get free, but your luggage exceeds the limit, so you will probably have to pay an additional 1 penny luggage ticket. The ferry will take you and your family to the estuary area, where you can buy a map. There are many people setting up stalls at the ferry terminal. Anyone who charges more than 5 pence is a scammer or an artist. You can follow the map to find the intercity carriage station, or you can take a roadside public carriage to the station. The difference between them is the flag edge of the carriage. The red-edged pansy is the intercity carriage, which runs every hour and costs 2 pence per person. The blue-edged pansy is the public carriage, which runs on the main road and costs only 1 penny per person. Upon arrival at Elk Grove, you'll need to first see the village chief. This position will be temporarily held by an employee of the Chamber of Commerce, but there will be the first popular election on March 1st. You can choose the neighbor you identify with. Once chosen, he or she will oversee village affairs for the next 3 years. That's all. Do you have any other questions? Dad couldn't remember how many times he'd been stunned that day. He stood there, desperately digesting Vivian's long descriptions of heaven. Raoul, seeing the situation was dire, quickly stepped forward, puffed out his tender chest, and bowed deeply to Vivian with a reassuring air. Madam, I heard many legends about Miami on the ship, but they were so beautiful that I always believed they were fake. What about now? They are indeed fake. Although you can still see cruel officials and evil soldiers, this place is 100 times and 1,000 times better than Barcelona. It is a beautiful paradise decorated with pansies. The legends don't express her beauty at all. Your words are the best compliment to Drake. Vivian smiled softly. Please try to fall in love with this town. That is the heartfelt wish of all Drakes. She lifted her skirt and bent her knees. Adios, goodbye. Chapter 516, Rebirth v. Elk Glade. Ferry, alley, carriage, fields. Crossing the azure bay of Capus, passing through the neat estuary town, the scenery gradually opened up, with grassy hills giving way to buildings. Finally, Raoul spotted a green and white signboard with a pansy border beside the dirt road. There were 3 single arrow signs, one pointing northwest. Inscribed in black cursive script was Bosques de Osses, meaning woodland of elk. Raoul had secretly learned to write at Viscount Zona's cattle stable, and could barely make out the Osses. It meant elk, and perhaps because it was easy to write and recognize, the talkative coachman referred to the elk woodland as Osses throughout the journey. Was this road's end point our new home? Raoul's heart pounded. The local carriage's destination was Mailang Township, and it would never turn onto the Osses Road. The Bachran family had no choice but to disembark at the fork in the road. Raoul held his sister's hand while his father and mother carried the luggage. After all the luggage was unloaded from the carriage, the driver said to his father, "Follow this path for another kilometer until you reach Arces. Do you see that stream on the side? If you see a fork in the road, follow the water." Apart from this correct path, the others were either made by Indians or by wild animals seeking water. You're unfamiliar with the area, and if you take the wrong path, you might be in danger. His father nodded hurriedly. "What do you want to do first when we get home?" the driver asked. Maybe they want to build a house first. They can't let the kids live in a tent all the time. The Chamber of Commerce provides authentic felt tents. They may be a little old, but they're very warm and spacious, so we can take our time with the house. My advice is to find work in Mailang Township as soon as you're settled. You only need one person to tend the fields at home, and even if you're planting potatoes, it takes 100 days from planting to harvest. Before that, you need to get established. Mailang Township has a labor recommendation center run by the Chamber of Commerce. If you have a job, you get paid, and if you get paid, you get food. That's the key. I see. Dad suddenly understood, and his uneasiness about the unknown future dissipated a little. The family said goodbye to the driver and set off on their journey. The weather in Miami was warm and pleasant. It was only New Year's Day, but already there was a hint of spring. Grass sprouted, and birds chirped. Sophia fell asleep in her mother's arms. They had been traveling a day in a strange land since they disembarked early that morning. The setting sun hung high in the sky, a brilliant crimson and yellow, blazing a vast expanse of clouds, languishing leisurely over the forested landscape. They soon spotted the stream that had come up so often in their conversation. The clear water was less than half a meter deep, its banks paved with large, rocky beaches of dazzling pebbles. Following the stream, They crossed several seemingly unrelated forks and crossed a new wooden bridge, passing from the left bank to the right. There lay the elk forest, with stretches of lush green pastures in the near distance and gently rolling hills in the distance. At the end of the hills lay the woods, presumably the legendary wild forest home to deer and Indians. Dad put down his luggage, wiped his sweat, and glanced at the scattered tents, near and far. There were 20 or 30 tents, but only a dozen or so had their curtains drawn. The yard was filled with piles of firewood and hay. A group of children, chasing a puppy, frolicked through the tents, laughing as they ran toward the village square. There stood the village's only official building, a two-story wooden building with twin towers. From its spires flew the Spanish flag and the Florida governor's flag. In the open space in front of the building stood a simple flagpole, barely 2 stories high. From it fluttered the familiar pansy flag that Dad had come to know. However, this pansy was different from the others he had seen along the way. It had no stripes or borders, and its calyxes overlapped in an X-like shape. At first glance, it resembled a pirate flag on a white background. "Is that the village office?" Dad pointed at the white pirate flag. "Ms. Vivian asked us to see the village chief first." "Raoul, let Mom and Sister rest while we go find the chief first." "Yes," Raoul nodded solemnly. Unlike the three-dimensional political model established by Eastern empires during their long era of centralized rule, the Western political model has always been a combination of flat and three-dimensional forms. This is a political legacy of the feudal fiefdom era. In that era, lords held complete and independent political power within their fiefdoms, and each fiefdom could be considered an independent nation. Fief governments were accountable only to their lords, while the lords themselves, as vassals of their superior lords, were accountable to their lords. This is the origin of the saying, "My lord's lord is not my lord, and my vassal's vassal is not my vassal." This political model has undergone subtle changes with the growth of civil rights awareness. For example, in constitutional Britain, the aristocracy, led by the king, ceded power to Parliament, representing the people. Governments at all levels were accountable to Parliament, thus completing the flat structure of the political model. Heads of government were accountable to higher-level governments, thus completing the three-dimensional structure. The democratic United States, after its founding, undertook bold reforms to this political model, de-escalating it. Governors no longer reported to the federal government, but only to the state legislature. Mayors no longer reported to the state government, but only to their city and town councils. They even began to experiment with true citizen governance. In the United States, towns, villages, and some cities and towns have completely abandoned their legislatures, instead holding open residence meetings during annual legislature week. Within these administrative divisions, every registered adult resident can freely express their opinions at the meetings, discuss and decide on legislation and the budget for their town village, and the government presents special or comprehensive administrative reports to the meetings. The meetings also elect an executive committee. Unlike the legislators of the past, these committee members are amateur and non-profit, no longer holding specific powers. They simply oversee the daily operations of government, public affairs, and the use of funds approved by the meetings to appoint appropriate town-village mayors. This is a major innovation in the political system, the appointment of the head of government. Through this market-oriented approach, government members are completely divorced from the traditional civil service system, operating more like a corporation, with the relationship between the committee and the board of directors being like that between a CEO and the board of directors, and the residents acting as shareholders. Lorraine admired this anarchic reform of government, but Miami was, after all, a Spanish colony. Even if the Drake Chamber of Commerce had a significant voice, it would not be able to change the country's inherent political model. Miami's mayor is still appointed by the governor's office and reports to both the city council and the governor's office. Below the city hall are the district offices, and below the town council are the district councils. However, in communities without councils, such as the communities of Hecao Town and the villages of Cheyenne Town, Lorraine still exerted his influence in Miami. Local administrative affairs are led by residents' assemblies, modeled after the American electoral administrative committees. Committees consist of 3 to 5 members, depending on the population of the community, and the committee chair serves as the community township village head. Both the committees and their chairman are part-time and non-profit, not civil servants, and receive no salary. If the residents' assembly deems a full-time manager necessary, it raises funds for the appointment, and the committee hires the person, essentially replicating the American model of citizen politics. This system is relatively new. Even in Hekau Town, only 2 communities held their first residence assemblies and completed their first committee elections. The remaining applicable communities, townships, villages were still in the implementation phase, with temporary administrators being Drake employees, ensuring the 2 key elements of amateurism and public service, thus curbing the power of the future administrative committee. However, for the time being, Dad and Raoul didn't yet understand the difference between Miami and the former Viscount Zona. They naturally equated the elk forest with the nightly fiefdoms of mainland Spain, the village hall as a knight's castle, and the village chief as a great and noble knight. They approached the brand new, far from luxurious, building with trepidation, their eyes darting downward, anxiously searching for the hounds lurking in the shadows and the superior guards and servants who could communicate their requests. But they found none. No guards, no servants, no hounds. Only a docile pony, tethered to a post outside the village hall, its coat slicked with oil and stained with wet water, stood outside. Dad was in a dilemma. Outside the knight's castle, there were only children playing, and judging by their clothing, they all looked like they came from poor families. Report, what should I do? Raoul silently tugged at his father's coat, then extended his hand and pointed at the open door to the village hall. His father glared at him, his meaning clear and unmistakable. So what if the door's open? Are we going to barge in? Raoul immediately responded with a look. Can you knock? Knock? What if we catch something? That would be asking for trouble, but we can't just stand there. Raoul glanced at his mother. Mom's still holding Sophia, waiting. This, his father murmured, covering his mouth. Before he could utter a word, a burly man with a face full of flesh burst out of the village hall. He wore wide-legged cotton trousers, the look of a dockworker, and an oversized shirt. His short blonde hair stuck up, and his puffy cheeks were crisscrossed with scars. He only had one hand. Veins bulged on his only right hand, his thick palm clutching a long, half-eaten breadstick. He strode with a majestic gait. He stormed through the gate into the square, his voice cracking like a gong at the boisterous children. You bastards. Go back to eating your potatoes. The children scattered, leaving only a riot of exclamations drifting on the evening breeze. Run. The pirates are coming. Raoul and his father stared at each other for a long moment, their eyes fixed on each other's, each seeing their face paler and paler in the reflection of the other's pupils. Pirates, P.S. The American system of government managers, inspired by reality, is considered a model of self-government, or anarchism, perhaps the world's only successful attempt at anarchism. However, this system is only implemented at the grassroots level in the United States, and from the middle, it becomes a plutocracy. So there's no need to overglorify it, nor to deny it. Chapter 517, Rebirth VI, Settling Down. A fierce pressure, a heavy murderous aura. The setting sun bathed the village hall and the square, casting a bleak crimson halo everywhere, shrouded in shadows. The one-armed pirate chased the children away, then slowly twisted his neck around, locking onto Raoul and his father. Suddenly, a sinister smile flashed across his face. Young Raoul's legs buckled with fear, and his father wasn't much better. Though he stood firmly before his son, from Raoul's perspective, he could clearly see the sweat soaking through his clothes from his back. They couldn't run. Like lambs stared at by a wolf, their hearts clearly wanted to escape, but their legs wouldn't obey them. Not even a step, not even a turn. What should I do? What should I do? Raoul cried in his heart over and over. The pirate approached them, pausing with each step, occasionally taking a big bite of bread, the dry crumbs spilling from his mouth and falling into the dirt and mud. Raoul had heard such rumors. In the remote coastal villages of mainland Spain, pirates entered, slaughtering men and the elderly, enslaving women and children, and secretly establishing their own kingdoms. But the lords showed little concern for these subjects, unable to contribute their wealth, completely unaware that their territories had been lost. Newcomers, for various reasons, continued to fall into their traps, never to return. Could it be that this time, that terrifying legend had truly come true for them? Crack! The dull thud of his riding boots on the muddy ground made the pirate pause, swallowing his mouthful of bread in a few bites. Are you new immigrants? My name is Arhan, Robbie Arhan, the temporary village manager of Elk Grove, or what you often call Mr. Village Chief, the pirate proudly declared in his broken Spanish. The murderous intent was overwhelming. Dad clenched his teeth, trying hard to keep his voice from trembling. Mr. Village Chief, We just arrived from Spain. Our children are still young, and we've used up all our savings." He paused, his eyes widening. "Wait, you're the village chief." The sun had set, the remaining glow warm and dim. Casting aside the red glow on his body, Mr. Pirate was nothing more than a strong young man with bright eyes and an honest face. Alhan scratched his hair innocently, letting the brush-like tip brush breadcrumbs against him. "Yes, I'm the village chief. Are you new immigrants?" "Ah. The Bachlan family, from Barcelona. We just arrived in Miami this morning and were assigned number 17. Number 17, Alhan raised his eyes and thought for a moment. "It's a good piece of land. Where are the deeds and household registration?" His father quickly pulled them out of his pocket. Alhan quickly examined them, nodded, and handed the documents back. "I'll take you there while there's still daylight." Reuniting with his mother and sister, the family, led by Alhan, headed towards the stream. All the way, Raoul's eyes were fixed on Alhan's empty left sleeve. Alhan, sensing his gaze, turned and smiled brightly. "A lot." Raoul was startled and quickly shook his head, which then turned into a nod. Alhan watched with interest, pressing again. "Does that mean I care, or don't care?" I care." Alhan laughed. "I'm the temporary village manager of Elk Grove. Your village hasn't held a village meeting yet, hasn't established a budget, and hasn't decided whether to adopt committee-based self-governance or hire a professional manager. It doesn't matter if you don't understand these things. I spent several days learning them too, and the trainer nearly drove me crazy." Alhan's face flickered with nostalgia. "Simply put, if you want a manager to run your village in the future, the salary will have to be paid by all the villagers. Now that the Chamber of Commerce is managing it for you, my salary will be covered by the Chamber of Commerce. Of course, the Chamber of Commerce won't choose some random person to guide you to self-government. Don't look at me as silly, I was once a long-term sailor in the direct fleet." He pointed to the scar on his cheek. "This wound is from the Battle of Lee Robert Bay. A French cannonball pierced our bow, and a piece of wood pierced my face." He extended his right hand again, rolled up his sleeve, revealing a large, tangled mass of flesh. "During the San Carlos night raid, we engaged the Blackbeard pirates on Lake Nicaragua. A musket ball tore off a large chunk of flesh, nearly sending me reeling. Finally, the bare left arm. The Battle of Basse-Terre. Our ship was boarded by Vikings. I blocked 4 attacks with my left arm, creating an opportunity to kill 3 pirates." Raoul's heart pounded. He had never heard a warrior recount their past so calmly before. Whether it was the Knights of the Viscounty or the veterans returning home, those once perilous battle stories paled in comparison to Alhan's smile and mutilated body. Perhaps this was what a true warrior looked like. Compared to Alhan, those sleek, powerful warriors now seemed like clay and porcelain, impeccable at first glance, yet fragile at the slightest touch. Don Quixote, Raoul recalled the story the steward's son had used to taunt him. In it, there was a boastful knight who couldn't even ride a horse, yet he fabricated stories of heroic deeds to deceive others. Alhan couldn't hear clearly for a moment. "Little one, what did you say?" Raoul gathered his thoughts. "Mr. Village Chief, why would a warrior as formidable as you, why didn't you stay on the boat?" Alhan completed Raoul's question. "I'm a sailor, and probably a pretty skilled one at that. It's a shame my left hand can't grow back. Now that it's gone, I can no longer hoist the sail with both hands. Of course, I had to leave my beloved boat. If it were any other Chamber of Commerce, I'd probably have become a homeless person in the harbor, or died from an infected wound long ago. But thankfully, Drake is different. After my wound healed, the chairman arranged for me to come ashore and work as a postman at the post office below the development office. That's my main job. Village manager is just a part-time job, but the pay is good." At this point, Alhan stopped and pointed to the tent closest to the stream. "Tent 17, we're here." The Backrans followed his lead and looked into the distance, seeing a large, flat grassland between the dirt road and the stream, surrounded by a low fence. In the middle of the meadow stood a large Indian-style tent, about half new, its curtains tightly closed. Next to it was a small, ventilated shed with a simple stove, identical to the other tents. "Is this our land and our new home?" "It's your land and your temporary home," Alhan corrected. "I'll bring your potatoes over shortly. Go clean up the tents. They were built together, so no one's been in there for at least 2 months. By the way, while you're cleaning up, think about any questions you need answered. I won't be at the village office tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, so you won't be able to find me. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow." Alhan nodded solemnly. My union, the Miami Postal Courier Union, has submitted a request for consultation. We're going to discuss employee rights with the Development Office on January 20th. Regulations require us to organize a strike rally at least 7 days in advance, and the union representatives have chosen tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Strike. Dad's eyes widened, completely unable to understand why this village manager, who was so grateful to the Drake Chamber of Commerce, would go on strike. Yeah, that's the Drake thing. You can't just go on strike, but you can't just not participate either. Arhan shrugged. So tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, I'm going to be participating in a march and a sit-in. It's like camping. I'm very busy. You can't just go on strike, but you can't just not participate either. The Drake Chamber of Commerce, how strange. Chapter 518 Rebirth VI, Village Meeting. Busy days always fly by, and before they knew it, it was already 5 days since the Bakran family arrived in Miami. In 5 days, they had organized their home, gotten to know their neighbors, carefully selected every potato they were given, and together, they had cultivated 3 acres of fertile farmland. The atmosphere in Elk Grove was wonderful. Although Dad had heard that every colonial settlement was accompanied by bloody power struggles in its early years, with the victor seizing most resources and the loser often losing their lives, this hadn't happened once in the 5 days since the Bakran family settled in. Everyone was friendly. Sophia played with the village children without being bullied, and Raoul had friends his own age, sharing everything with those who had arrived later. Mr. Tula's family was the first to move into the village and had been there 3 months. During the 2-day strike by manager Alhan, he was elected by the entire village to serve as village chief for a short period, demonstrating a dedicated and conscientious character. He had also gathered the village heads together to encourage them to cherish their current stability. Mr. Tula explained that the Elk Grove area was planned for 36 households of self-employed farmers and 4 farms. Currently, 23 households have been divided among the self-employed, and not a single farm has been sold. However, the farms range in size from 100 to over 300 acres. Once they move in, the owners will undoubtedly be wealthy individuals with a small fortune. Propertyless people like them cannot compete with the wealthy and powerful owners. Their only chance to maintain the harmony of Elk Grove is to unite and convene a village meeting before the first farm is established to establish a village charter that benefits the majority. Mr. Tula went to Malang Township to inquire about the village meeting, even spending 2 gold coins to consult a township lawyer for accuracy. First, the bylaws drafted by the Drake Chamber of Commerce and the City Hall favor the wealthy. They allow for vote buying, with a price to be agreed upon. The meeting also requires each household to disclose its contribution to the village operating fund, and tangible donations will undoubtedly influence the final vote. However, the bylaws still leave room for the majority of the poor. First, a villager assembly can be convened with a consensus of 50% of the incoming population, requiring unanimous approval, and a mandatory meeting with an 80% majority. The planned relocation of 40 households in Milu Forest exceeded the requirement for a consensus meeting. With unity, they could hold the first villager assembly before the wealthy moved in. Second, the village committee's term lasts 3 years, unless a member resigns or violates the law. This means the elected committee can make many decisions during those 3 years, turning Milu Forest into a paradise for the proletariat. Third, even if the committee is overthrown by wealthy individuals and the first committee is disbanded prematurely, the previously agreed village rules must be amended with 2/3 support at the assembly, giving the proletariat, who constitute a majority, a significant voice. The key is the initial agreement on village rules. Mr. Tula is a master of mobilizing the people, and Milu Forest is a rare case in which no farms have moved in despite meeting the requirements for a consensus assembly. Mr. Tula persuaded the villagers, and even my father abandoned his plan to immediately seek employment in Malang Township and stayed in the village to await the first assembly. On the evening of January 4th, taking advantage of the village manager's strike, the relocated residents of Elk Forest convened their first informal meeting. On January 6th, Mr. Tula applied to the village office for an agreement to convene the first village general meeting. On January 7th, after 4 hours of voting, the agreement to convene the first village general meeting was unanimously approved, with a meeting scheduled for January 15th. The villagers elected a preparatory committee for the meeting. Mr. Tula, who had moved in 3 months earlier, Mr. Burris, who had moved in 2 months earlier, Mr. Lobik, who had moved in a month earlier, Mr. Bachlan, who had recently moved in, and Mr. Chacha, the only Indian, were elected as preparatory representatives. Manager Alhun suggested that the preparatory committee go to Malang Township and hire a real lawyer to draft the first village contract. A professional's opinion was clearly more valuable than that of farmers who had never experienced their rights. On January 8, the relocated residents of Elk Forest raised 6 gold and 9 pence. 1 octagonal gold coin equals 1/8 of a pound equals 30 pence. Mr. Tula, accompanied by Mr. Bachlan, the only unemployed member of the committee, and carrying the earnest expectations of all the villagers, solemnly set out for Malang Township. Malang Township lies in the center of the largest plain in the Cheyenne district. Rolling hills stretch to the north and south, and the vast Miami River stretches to the southwest. Across the river lies the Blackfeather, a powerful Indian tribe. The Blackfeather is one of the 7 most powerful tribes in Florida, with a total population exceeding 150,000. When the Drake Chamber of Commerce acquired land in Miami, the acreage they sold comprised 1/3 of the city, encompassing the entire Cheyenne district, the planned northern industrial zone, and a small portion of the College district. They also provided the largest labor force for Miami's construction. Over 8,000 young Blackfeather men and women toiled on Miami's construction sites, their distinctive, eccentric accents a common sight. Consequently, Malang Township was considered a frontier. The City Hall viewed it as a frontier of defense against Blackfeather invasions, and the Drake Chamber of Commerce viewed it as a frontier for labor recruitment. However, regardless of their past harmony, relations between the Blackfeather and the Drake Chamber of Commerce became increasingly strained with the establishment of Miami and the arrival of Spanish troops. The Malang Township office, a 4-story wooden structure, stood at the end of Plaza Street, its only cobblestone road. Nearby, row houses housed the district office, chapel, shops, school, tax station, post office, and police station. Negotiations were underway in the office's meeting room between Cal Drago and his Indian Affairs team and a Blackfeather tribe delegation led by its young chief and elders. Young Chief Yixinki, wearing the tribe's distinctive vulture feather crest and painted in multicolored oil paint, looked solemn. Drago Oldman, the Drake Chamber of Commerce was once a friend of the Blackfeather tribe. We once thought this friendship would last forever, but you clearly don't see it that way. Drago wore a sleeveless, bare-chested, Indian-style wolfskin coat with a leopard tattoo on his shoulder. His face was plain, and he wore no crown. He took a sip of coffee and raised his head calmly. Young Chief Yixinchi, I don't quite understand what you mean. You condoned the Spanish stationing troops in Miami and even seduced our people. The young chief slammed his palm on the table. In the past few months, 186 Indian families have left the tribe, most of them young people in their 20s. This has had a negative impact on the tribe, Drago laughed heartily. This is simply nonsense. Spain officially recognizes Miami's status. Miami is now a town under Spanish rule, recognized and protected by the Florida governor's office. The Spanish have the right to station troops in their own town, just as the young chief has the right to station troops in his own tribe. The Miami Development Office fully considered the feelings of the Blackfeather tribe. We rejected the City Hall's request to set up a military camp in Malang Township. This alone is enough to demonstrate Drake's sincerity. As for immigration, Miami is a free town. Immigration regulations do not restrict anyone's autonomous will, nor do they emphasize white privilege. This is fair. More than 13,000 members of the Blackfeather tribe live in Miami's barracks for work. Among them, 8,361 work for Miami, and over 70% are dispatched and settled uniformly by your tribe. They are familiar with Miami, and based on this familiarity, they choose to become Miami people on their own. This is their freedom. We have not tempted anyone, or rather, if we wanted to tempt them, there would be far more people applying for Miami household registration than there are now. What's more, as far as I know, there are more than 370 Blackfeather tribe households that have naturalized in Miami, most of which have settled in Cheyenne district, but less than 200 households have actually left the Blackfeather tribe. Miami law does not object to Miami Indians being loyal to and owning a tribe. Just like me, I am both a Miami and an Oldman of the Shark-Tooth tribe. My tribe has 393 households and more than 1,500 people. We have established a community in Hakau Town and have sporadically joined 2 townships and 14 villages, but their loyalty to Miami has never affected their loyalty to me. Population separation is your problem. You should reflect on yourself and see if you should change, instead of complaining that we give you treatment that you can't give. We didn't set any special bait. Miami Indians receive the same treatment as Miami whites and Miami blacks. It's neither preferential nor special. The young patriarch gritted his teeth. Drago Cal, you are a traitor to the Indians. Like every mosquito old man, I'm simply striving for fairness for my people in the white man's world. Drago's tone was even, but his eyes flickered with a subtle bitterness that the young chief couldn't understand. The white men have come. If you can't drive them away, you must learn how to coexist with them. Are you inviting a war? War? Drago's eyes swept sharply over the elders surrounding the young chief. At least half of them lowered their heads guiltily. If you and your father wish to see the black feathers destroyed by your hands, then come. Chapter 519, Rebirth Vidai, Unity is a false proposition. Mr. Tuka, this should be the township office, right? Mr. Bachlan asked uncertainly, looking at the red and white four-story building in front of him. Mailang Township is very prosperous. As the seat of Cheyenne District, the naturalized population here alone exceeds 1,000, almost reaching the total population of the remaining 2 townships or 9 villages. The hustle and bustle of people on the street dazzled Mr. Bachlan. Mr. Tuka nodded, pointed to the row of houses and said, the church is at the beginning of the street, the district office is in the middle, and the township office is at the end of the street. This is the most convenient way to remember the street. The district office is in the middle? The white building with a blue roof? Yes. Do you see the flag on the roof? That's the district flag of Cheyenne District. It seems that it can only be seen here and at the city hall. Mr. Bachlan suddenly understood, but after understanding, he was also full of doubts. Why isn't the district hall built as big as the township office? It's because of the township assembly, Mr. Tuka said, curling his lips. I told you, the assembly will announce each household's donation to the village, right? Mr. Bachlan nodded. The lawyer used Mailang Township as an example. Their township assembly is on the 20th of next month, but the date was announced 2 months ago. Mr. Ferrero, a wealthy man in Mailang Township, offered an election subsidy of 1 gold coin per vote and also invested 3,000 gold coins in the township fund to rush the construction of the building. 3,000. Mr. Bachlan couldn't imagine such a large sum of money and asked in astonishment, doesn't that mean he's a sure winner? Not necessarily. Mr. Tuka stamped the flagstones under his feet. This flagstone street and the fountain square we just passed were donated by another wealthy man, Mr. Orlis. His election subsidy was also 1 gold coin per vote. It's a competition of financial strength. After all, the election law supports it. Mr. Bachlan swallowed his saliva. Mr. Tuka, if someone breaks their promise about that election subsidy, that can't happen. Tuka smiled. My lawyer told me that the person who announces the provision of subsidies must submit the equivalent of unanimous election money to the preparatory committee 1 week before the election, and the poll watchers will distribute it on the spot. Candidates who do not submit or submit insufficient amounts will be made public, and in this way, they will almost lose the possibility of being elected. That's very thoughtful. There was envy in Bachlan's voice. No wonder you want to convene a meeting before the rich people move in. Well, Tuka sighed helplessly. Compared with the rich people, our promises are too weak. Bachlan suddenly thought of something. Mr. Tuka, before I came here, I heard from the head of Alhan village that farm number 3 has been sold. If the rich man moves into the village before our meeting, the villagers' meeting has already been decided, and those who move in later cannot change it. But he can ask for subsidies, donate in these few days, run for the committee, or even run for chairman. If he is elected chairman, will he deny the village agreement we drafted? The committee chairman can't restrict villagers from speaking, and he only has 1 vote in a vote. As long as we're united, he can't change anything. Tuka clenched his fist as if to encourage himself. As long as we're united, we'll always have the final say when it comes to voting. Bachlan fell silent. Unity is a false proposition. If the poor were truly united, the rich wouldn't be able to win an election, let alone become committee chairman. He suddenly remembered what Arhan had said when he suggested they hire a lawyer. I know what you want, but you can't articulate it well. Only a lawyer can address your demands and steer the village agreement in the direction you desire. At the time, Bachlan had naively assumed Arhan was worried that they, the peasants, weren't good at expressing themselves. Now, recalling it, he realized that wasn't the point at all. It's possible Arhan had already seen what was happening, and even what would happen in the future. He suddenly felt anxious and worried. 6 gold coins might mean nothing to the wealthy, but for these poor people, who had just left their homes and relied on immigration subsidies from the Drake Chamber of Commerce to feed their children. It was a fortune. What if? Mr. Tula, can the lawyer really give us what we want? I don't know, Tula said in a low voice. But if we do, at least there's a chance. If not, what did we leave home for? For a better life? Bachlan didn't say this out loud, but his eyes confirmed his answer. Tula patted him firmly on the shoulder and smiled. Go, find a lawyer. Bachlan nodded heavily. Mr. Tula, where are the lawyers? There are 2 lawyers in Mailing Township. One is near Fountain Square, but their fees are very high. A simple consultation costs 20 or 30 gold coins. We can't afford it. The other has an office in the township office. Their fees are very low, only 1/10 of the first one's. And their reputations are almost the same. At least the difference in their quotes isn't that big. Bachlan had become accustomed to such strange stories these days. He smiled knowingly. I understand. That lawyer must have been arranged by the Drake Chamber of Commerce for us poor people. Just like those charity works, he's mainly subsidized by the chamber, right? Well, Tuka scratched his head sheepishly. There seems to be a slight difference. According to the lawyer himself, his main job is an accountant at the township office, a qualified accountant. As for the low fees, part-time work isn't the main reason. More importantly, he doesn't seem to have obtained a legal professional license. Bachran's mind was a bit confused. Unqualified means, it means the courts have never recognized him as a lawyer. Puff. The fake lawyer was actually an accountant. His job at the township office lent this barefoot actor-like identity a crucial credibility. More importantly, the residents of Elk Grove simply couldn't afford another legal advisor. For all these reasons, Bachran quickly chose to trust him. The 2 registered in the township office lobby and entered the small building to find the lawyer. On the way, they encountered a large group of Indians filing out of a large conference room. Whether it was an illusion, Bachran sensed a tense atmosphere. The Indians in front wore black feather caps, their faces painted with grease, their expressions sullen and unapproachable. The Indians behind exuded the familiar aura of civilized society. A group of them surrounded a particularly tall young man in the center, maintaining a delicate 3 or 4 paces distance from the black-feathered men in front. It was more like an escort than a farewell. Tula quickly tugged Bachran aside, head lowered, and watched the 2 groups pass by. The crowd retreated. Just as the main group was about to disappear from view, Bachran suddenly heard soft voices and whispers on the wind. Old man, if the black feathers stubbornly insist on choosing war, should we? There's no need to do anything. A crude assassination will only unite the Florida natives. Drago shook his head slightly. As for the black feathers' naive declaration of war, I will report it to the president immediately. As far as I know, he and manager Xavier have always had a contingency plan for these bad-tempered neighbors. Yes. The intermittent voices finally faded away, and only Tula and Bachran were left in the bright corridor, huddled at the edge, staring at each other. Bachran looked at his companion in horror. Mr. Tula, Indians, war, calm down, Mr. Bachran, calm down. Tula swallowed hard. These 2 groups of Indians may have just chosen the township office to negotiate, just like the War of Independence a few years ago chose to negotiate in Paris. Besides, the Miami and Indian Plains are separated by the broad Miami River. Their war should not spread to us, and, he slumped his shoulders dejectedly, I think, we need to listen carefully to Manager Alhan's opinions. Let's go back after finishing the draft. Damn it, this is big news. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520, Rebirth IX, 100 Cares and a Loophole. Tea? Or coffee? Lorraine asked her guest at the Drake residence in Pansy Manor. The guest was Chris Emmons, a captain in the British Royal Navy, a long-time acquaintance of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, and what Lorraine had called the sinister, venomous snake ensnared by Shaq. Her memory flashed back to Muscat. Around this time last year, Emmons had participated in the Muscat invasion as a Royal Navy observer, investigating the Valkyrie's excessive configuration on the battlefield. Lorraine had subsequently paid him £5,000 for a favorable report. This report later played a significant role in the Drake Chamber of Commerce's lawsuit against Portugal. From this perspective, Emmons played a crucial role in Lorraine's victory in Europe. And this wasn't Lorraine's only interaction with Emmons. The Overend case marked the midpoint. Afterward, Emmons cleverly facilitated the Royal Navy's African fleet's involvement in the Muscat invasion. Prior to that, he'd sold Lorraine 4 48-pound mortars during Shark's transfer to the Admiralty. Before that, he'd provided intelligence support during the Boston trip and the arms smuggling operation. Their actual friendship had lasted for many years. While he might not have known Lorraine and Kenway were the same person, at different times, this greedy and trusted scoundrel had certainly helped Lorraine immensely. Of course, Lorraine had also given him much in return. But that still didn't explain his presence in Miami at this critical juncture. Was it a diplomatic mission? Or a private affair? Lorraine pondered Emmons's motives and heard him reply, "Coffee, top quality, double milk, no sugar." Lorraine shrugged. "Monica, do as the guest requested, and have some snacks brought up. I'll arrange that, sir." Monica, Afi's successor, Dylan's eldest daughter, Flamin's sister, and the Drake house's housekeeper, bowed her head in a manly chest-touching gesture, then opened the door behind her and stepped back from the room. As the door closed, Emmons gave a strange laugh. Generally speaking, there are two reasons why nobles abandon professional male butlers. One is a distant relative, and the other is a mistress. Ms. Monica is certainly not your relative. It's just that as a mistress, although she is beautiful enough, she seems a little old for you, and her manners are a little restrained. The colonel's mind is still as despicable as ever. Lorraine poured himself a glass of wine, shook the glass, and let the four-leaf clover-shaped ice cubes hit the wall of the glass, making a crisp sound. "Monica is my wife, and her husband is a young and promising designer from the Maritime Group. She became my housekeeper only because of the recommendation of the previous housekeeper. There aren't that many generalizations in this world. All the generalizations are actually just random summaries made by boring people like you. They are neither scientific nor responsible." "Your words are still so sharp," Emmons said casually. "Your previous housekeeper. I remember, it was Miss McCarthy who had been obsessed with Judea, right? It's been 7 years? Or was it 6 years? Did he succeed in winning her heart? They are already married. I don't believe you haven't heard about the restoration of the title of the Breed family. The biological mother of the new Earl of Breed is..." Lorraine's hand, which was shaking the wine glass, suddenly stopped, and his eyes suddenly became sharp. "Colonel, I'm curious, how did you know that Belle's wife was my housekeeper?" Emmons' face changed drastically, and he subconsciously reached for his waist. "Duh." Without warning, a red velvet-wrapped throwing knife slid past his face and pierced a coffee table with pinpoint accuracy, piercing deep into the wood. Emmons's hand paused mid-sentence, a cold sweat pouring down his forehead and down his cheek folds. "Hi, Hina Yesra, the assassin's reputation for concealment is truly well-deserved. I didn't even realize there was a third person in the room. Should I say your interruption skills are poor?" Lorraine approached with a cold expression and, with a thud, slammed his glass down in front of Emmons. "I'm asking you for help, Colonel Emmons. How did you know that Lady Judea was my housekeeper? And how did you know this long-term love affair began in 1779, 1779, Emmons laughed guiltily. "You're too sensitive. I was just saying it casually. Please think carefully before answering," Lorraine interrupted Emmons in a high-pitched voice. "Because that will determine whether you'll encounter pirates on your way home. The New World is not peaceful, and sailing in this ocean is risky." Emmons closed his mouth without saying a word, his eyes moving rapidly as if connected to a steam engine. "By the way, in 1779, after Judea escaped from the Navy, didn't she work for you for a while?" "Yes, she did, and she even participated in Operation Halloween." Lorraine slowly pushed the glass forward, and with a ding, it gently touched the throwing knife. "But not long after the operation ended, he resigned from the Drake Merchants Guild. I couldn't give him what he wanted, so he joined Edward Kenway's smuggling gang. But at that time, he definitely didn't show any affection for Aoife, didn't show any affection." The sweat on Emmons' face became heavier, but his voice became much calmer. "You may not know that I persuaded him to defect when I was investigating the Kenway smuggling group. He was already in love with Lady Mai Judea. He told me personally." "Really?" Lorraine grinned, but there was no smile in his eyes. "It seems you are ready to encounter pirates, Henna." Henna landed behind Emmons like a ghost, the dagger in her hand raised high, and exerted force towards her most experienced side force. "Wait." The tip of the knife stopped moving in the blink of an eye and paused on the skin on the side of Emmons' neck. Bright red blood oozed out, rolling like morning dew on the snow-white blade. Emmons's body was rigid, veins bulging beneath his skin like a heart, pulsating violently as if ready to burst. He gasped for breath. "President Drake, I'm not the only one who knows you're Edward Kenway. Killing me would hurt the true feelings between you and your brother. From your perspective, I don't recommend doing that at all, is that so?" Lorraine was silent for a moment. "Colonel, would you like to visit my wine cellar? There are many valuable and fine wines there. I promise you'll be amazed." Feeling Henna's blade withdraw from his neck, Emmons swallowed hard. "With great pleasure, that's great." Lorraine finally smiled happily, though there was still no smile in his eyes. "Henna, have Colonel Emmons taken to the wine cellar. Ask Leif and Atron to accompany him. Also, ask Bell to come. I have something I want to discuss with him." "Okay." Chapter 521 Rebirth X, Suspicion. The fourth floor of the Drake house is a vast, airy, stepped conference room, capable of seating over 200 people at full capacity. Although it's cleaned daily, it's rarely used. However, the last time it was used was quite recently, at the 1785 Miami annual meeting, the highest attendee and second highest percentage meeting in the Drake Chamber's history. As the Chamber's first annual meeting since relocating to Miami, on December 15 of that year, 147 partner-level employees from around the world abandoned their work and rushed to the meeting room. Ironically, there were no general-level agenda items for this meeting, not a single one. The Drake Chamber has long since completed its global framework development phase, and its core direction for the next 30, even 100, has been determined. The challenge now is not to revise it, but to expand upon it. How can the established framework be enriched? How can the Chamber achieve its goals within or ahead of schedule? Lorraine and the other Drakes needed to consider these matters immediately, and these were precisely the details. The proper implementation and execution lay not with the General Chamber of Commerce, but with its affiliated groups and branches. Thus, Wu Huanhun's partners gathered from around the world, debating their respective plans and needs for 9 days. After Christmas, Wu Huanhun returned to their respective fields. While this grand annual meeting was certainly meaningful, drawing on the strengths of all, and pooling ideas, these minor benefits seemed paltry compared to the time saved by each group and branch holding its own annual meeting nearby. This was Lorraine's sincere feeling at the time. But how should I put it? Just as being human requires a certain sense of ritual in life, a business also needs rituals in its development. If the partners can truly feel the Drake Chamber's vibrant and prosperous development momentum, efficiency considerations can often become secondary, especially for temporary impacts. The grand annual meeting concluded, and just a week later, the venue is reopened. Everyone gathered in a short space of time. There were Lorraine, Henna, and Noah, who had already been at the Drake residence. There was Katharina, still wheelchair-bound from her injuries. There was Wang Yi, who had recently returned from visiting friends in Boston. There was Daniel, who had officially completed his treatment and had returned from Fort-de-France with Leif. There was Karen, who had been incredibly busy lately, and Carmen, the only one who made Karen feel even more miserable, who had been so busy she hadn't even left the house. Everyone's expression was solemn. Lorraine had explained the whole story when he had gathered them. Carmen sat beside Lorraine, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. "Belgiodia, is his role confirmed?" "Not sure." Lorraine folded his arms, supporting his chin like a brace, as if he couldn't maintain his composure without doing so. Bell could be a spy for Shaq, a spy for the Navy, or simply a talkative person. Of course, this possibility is extremely small. I understand how you feel. Catalina's eyes were cold. But Belgiodia is not our negligence, and he is not Atron. The so-called talkative person is just wishful thinking. I know. Lorraine sighed. Carmen arranged for Sharon to invite Bell, so he won't be on guard. He will only think that today's gathering is to listen to Carmen's report on the progress of Miami's development. Let's sort out the relevant things before he comes. Carmen flipped open the document in front of her expressionlessly. Bell St. Belgiodia, first in line to the Earl of St. Bred in England, formerly a lieutenant commander in the British Royal Navy, a shareholder and board member of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, first in line to command a direct fleet, helmsman-in-chief of the Valkyrie, first in line to navigator, and professor of ship operations at the University of Miami Maritime Academy. This is information we are all familiar with. Belgiodia joined the Chamber of Commerce in 1779, first participating in Operation Halloween, where he played a vital role and became famous, After joining the Kenway merchant group, he was suspected for privately contacting former colleagues. Later, we established an intelligence channel with Chris Emmons, who played a significant role and was the main person in charge of this line. It was precisely because of his connection with Chris Emmons that we began preparing for his whereabouts in 1979, striving to cut off any trace of contact between the Kenway merchant group and the Drake Chamber of Commerce. We fabricated the story of Belgiodia's disagreement with the captain, and fabricated information that Belgiodia resigned after Operation Halloween and joined the Kenway Merchant Corps. We forged 16 documents that should have been recorded and reflected this incident, 49 that didn't, and deliberately deleted and abolished 12 documents. However, the archive documents and fragments were carefully placed in the archives. Belgiodia then began his activities as a member of the Kenway Merchant Corps. During this period, including Operation Sea Reach, he deliberately avoided contact with Royal Navy officers. At the same time, through layers of control, our capital was also interfering with the Royal Navy's judgment. Considering the inevitable merger of the Merchant Corps and the Chamber of Commerce, each of us, except Belgiodia, had a false identity in the Merchant Corps. And except for Edward Kenway, no one of us, including Belgiodia, had a bounty on our hands. In 1781, the Kenway Merchant Corps was deregistered and fully acquired by Drake's capital and capital controlled by us. According to information, Edward Kenway died, and his entourage, Belgiodia, and 5 of our fake identities followed him. They are nowhere to be found, and the others joined the Chamber of Commerce in various positions. It took me 2 years to digest these fake identities. Aside from Belgiodia, 2 were expelled for negligence, 1 died of illness, and the rest died at sea. Belgiodia was the last person in the Kenway Merchant Corps who could be verified, but he bought back his family's earldom. This alone proves that our work was effective, and his past no longer has any influence. Carmen snapped the file shut and looked up. Everything I just said is top secret of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. There are only 2 records. One is kept in the underground archives under the Miami Monument, and the other is stored in a random order among 197 historical archives in Southampton, New York, Lucia, St. Diana, and Jackdaw. There is no possibility of leakage in either archive. I handled everything single-handedly. I'm the only one involved who knows the full story, and there's no chance of leaks from the execution side. However, the connection between the Kenway merchants and the Drake Chamber of Commerce has indeed been exposed. Based on all this, Belgiodia is the sole suspect, and I stand behind my judgment. Carmen gave Lorraine a loving look as she spoke. Lorraine returned a gesture with a thankful glance and a slight shake of her head. I made the judgment that Belle was a suspect. You know, Carmen has been too busy worrying about these trivial matters lately. Lorraine smiled. By the way, right now, KO should be in Wheatwave Town negotiating with the radical Blackfeather tribe, right? Carmen knew Lorraine wanted to protect her. After all, they had cultivated a deep friendship over the years. In comparison, Carmen, devoted to the business of the guild, seemed more emotionally distant. Suspicion, conviction, judgment. Regardless of right or wrong, Carmen simply didn't want to create a rift between Lorraine and his crew, and Lorraine didn't want Carmen to become a target for their frustration. Carmen understood all this, and even more so, she could tell from Lorraine's words that he had already made up his mind. So, she obediently followed Lorraine's lead and changed the subject. The Development Office's assessment of these negotiations is pessimistic. Including the Blackfeather tribe, there are radical factions in Florida, large and small, that are hostile to Miami. Spain is just an excuse, and large-scale immigration is just a facade. We've already settled the land settlement with them, and they can't get any more. Now they just want to drive us out to sea. Hina raised an eyebrow and spoke for the first time that day. Kill them. Carmen nodded, then shook her head. Kill them, but we don't have to do it. Since there are radicals, there are naturally moderates who welcome coexistence. We've been infiltrating and cultivating them. In the Blackfeather tribe alone, 11 of the 17 elders have significant interests in Miami, and the same is true for the other tribes. They can't escape our control. If we so choose, those war-minded barbarians can be uprooted at any time. The key is, when do we need them dead? Carmen raised her slender neck. Miami needs a resounding victory, a real war different from the Biscay Bay drills. It will let people see the safety of Miami, further stimulate land prices and immigration, which is the most valuable contribution those people can make to Miami. The war will start and end quickly. Victory will be ours, but I only hope that this victory can offset our losses today. Chapter 522 Rebirth Zai, exposed. Victory will be ours, but I only hope it can offset today's losses. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the meeting hall, which had finally begun to improve due to the plan for the Indians, plummeted to the bottom again. Carmen seemed determined to be the villain in this situation. Not only did she implicitly confirm Belle's guilt, but she also coldly referred to it all as losses, or more specifically, economic losses. In fact, even now, Lorraine hadn't fully figured out how to deal with Belle. Assuming Belle was truly a double-faced person hidden within the Chamber of Commerce, what impact would this identity have on the Drake Chamber of Commerce and on him personally? Transferring the bounty from Edward Kenway to Lorraine, thereby labeling him a traitor? This seemed to be the most serious impact. Conviction would result in hanging, tarnishing the Drake family's reputation. The Drake Chamber of Commerce is a British Chamber of Commerce, and if this were exposed, its foundation would naturally be in jeopardy. But calmly considering, the Drake Chamber of Commerce is now a global megacorporation. Severing the British connection would be a major blow, but it wouldn't be fatal. After all, neither the Miami, the Maritime Group, nor the rapidly growing American branch are within British control. British influence in Africa and Europe isn't their only option. The same applies to Lorraine's personal safety. Britain could sentence him to death, but who would carry out the execution? Who would arrest him? If Lorraine transferred his citizenship to the United States, France, or Spain, what means could Britain use to stop him? The Drake family is left with no escape. Lorraine's actions would destroy the family's reputation, built over 2 centuries, overnight. But does the Drake family's fate truly depend on Lorraine? Even if things were to change, with his status as the Lorraine family's outcast, does Shaq really have no means of self-preservation? Things are different now. With millions of pounds of wealth accumulated over the years, Lorraine and the Drake Chamber of Commerce were no longer simply merchants at the mercy of others. He was a Jebel, the world's greatest Jebel. There was no benefit in forcing him to oppose Britain. From a rational point of view, if Britain truly knew of Lorraine and Kenway's relationship, using this threat was a far superior option than a trial. As Carmen had said, the worst-case scenario was a loss of money. This realization left Lorraine even more bewildered. Because the consequences of betrayal were far less severe than first thought, this trial was more spiritual than material. Would it ultimately become another crisis that tore the team apart? Lorraine closed his eyes, only to open them again after a fleeting moment. Little Sharon entered, seemingly startled by the solemnity of the meeting room. She timidly told Carmen that Belle had arrived. "Let him in," Lorraine replied for Carmen. "Sharon, you don't have to follow." "Yes, President." The summons came without warning. Walking down the aisle to the conference venue, Belle's mind was filled with questions. After Michael's baptism, his family followed Lorraine's lead and moved from Lucia to Miami. The 5 of them lived comfortably in their brand new Judea house, enjoying a rare period of time together. A few days ago, after the exercises in the Bay of Biscay, Lorraine had told Belle during an afternoon gathering to prepare for sailing. They would likely be heading north to Boston soon. If this journey went smoothly, Valkyrie would likely welcome its most distinguished guest in its history, George Washington, the first president of the United States and a heroic leader of the Revolutionary War. Even for the Drake Chamber of Commerce, this would be a heavy, over-the-top honor, the opportunities and risks it held worthy of the Chamber's full commitment. It was precisely for this reason that Lorraine suppressed his restless nature. Even though the Valkyrie had long since been renovated, and even though there wasn't much work in Miami requiring his presence and decision-making, he remained at the Drake house, resting and recuperating. Belle's eyes lit up. This sudden summons. Was Carmen about to reveal the sky-high profits from the Miami development? Or was there finally news about the Boston trip? With eager anticipation, Belle smiled and bowed slightly to little Sharon at the door. Raising his hand, he pushed open the closed door. "Lorraine, His voice abruptly stopped. Belle stood at the doorway, gazing from afar at his silent companions seated at the central round table. Everyone was staring at him, subdued, silent, expressionless, devoid of even the slightest spark of spirit. "It seems, today's topic isn't good news. Colonel Chris Emmons is here," Lorraine said, neither confirming nor denying. "He's touring my wine cellar, accompanied by Atcherin and Leif." Belle froze. For a moment, a helpless, wry smile spread, followed by a deep sigh. "How much do you know?" "That depends on how much you're willing to tell," Lorraine said. "I really don't want to torture a distinguished officer unless it's necessary," Then please let him go. Bell scratched his hair, removed his sword, and tossed it aside. I know him. He's a money-hungry bastard, but you won't be able to pry anything valuable out of him unless you're authorized to do so. What about bribery? Bribery won't work, because to him, neither money nor life is his. In a few words, Bell had already walked to the round table, a wry smile spreading as he did so, a hint of relief, a touch of laziness. His attitude didn't resemble that of an exposed traitor, but rather that of a laborer relieved of a burden, leaving everyone puzzled. Well, my lord, when do you want me to start? Whenever you deem it necessary. We'll use our intuition to determine the truth. What a callous answer, Bell sneered, pulling his chair aside and plopping down. The starting point is Southampton, in 1778, when you returned from the Habashi expedition, a completely unexpected answer. Everyone opened their mouths in astonishment, and slowly shifted their gaze from Bell to Lorraine. Bell's voice rang out again. Just as you thought, the person who sent me was never my old boss, the arrogant general of the Admiralty, Baron Tavistock, but Lorraine's weird and stupid brother, Shack Francis Drake. Shack's secret help to Lorraine began in 1778. When he learned that you had suffered a great loss at the hands of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, Shack had guessed that Lorraine would initiate a decisive battle in the form of a boarding battle, so he asked me to pour out a batch of maritime commuter supplies from the warehouse. I hope you haven't forgotten that interesting past. After that, Lorraine and Shack met again in Kingston. In 1779. Shack used the whereabouts of this batch of military supplies to threaten me to get off the ship and asked me to sneak into Lorraine's side. At that time, no one knew that Lorraine was going to smuggle arms in the New World. I guess Shack was just worried. To make an inappropriate analogy, it's like a father secretly letting his servant follow his son on a long journey, not to collect evidence of his son's pursuit of beauty, but because he was worried that his son would be bitten by a watchdog during the pursuit of beauty. After that, defense secrets, 48 pounds. Emmons took charge of Bermuda, and I took charge of New Orleans. Business is booming, and even I often wonder if you two are colluding to become the founding fathers of the United States. Bell completely relaxed, his posture increasingly relaxed, his voice increasingly playful. A rising star in the business world brazenly smuggling munitions to the enemy, and a military leader without hesitation putting the fleet in danger. This is the current generation of the famous Drake family. Lorraine, as an old friend, an observer, and a British person, I don't expect you brothers to reconcile, but you should at least try to meet. I worry that if you continue this twisted relationship, Great Britain will be doomed. Chapter 523 Rebirth ZI, Obligation. Was this a case of the host turning hostile? Lorraine lazily leaned on the balcony, illuminated by the silver moon, his mind still replaying the roller coaster of the day. Bell had been released, unrestrained and unconstrained. His case was still unsolved, but since Drake could afford the worst, no one wanted to treat their former comrade like a prisoner. Emmons had also been pardoned and released from the cellar. Although Atrin and Leif no longer monitored him, he was still under constant watch by 10 men. In theory, he should be the best person to verify Bell's story, yet no one suggested confronting him remotely. Perhaps this was because everyone still trusted Bell's story as they had before the incident. If so, this trust would undoubtedly influence everyone's judgment of Emmons, since Bell had assured them that he would not reveal any valuable information. Was this a trap? Was Bell's story true or false? Or perhaps it was a brilliant lie, a mixture of truth and falsehood, 9 truths and 1 lie? Lorraine tried to think about the answer in the most objective way. However, he couldn't judge. One-sided testimony has no value for judgment, and Bell has sufficient reasons to exonerate himself. For example, a spy hired by the Ministry of the Navy is a real betrayal. If his actions were based solely on Shack's selfish desires, this matter would undoubtedly be more like a farce between the Drake brothers. Although it was buried a little deeper, Lorraine would be petty if he delved into it. What is the truth? There was a sound of a door opening behind him, and Henna, Carmen, and Noah walked in together, their expressions full of unconcealable fatigue. Thank you for your hard work, Lorraine said softly. This matter is of great importance and it is not suitable to be handed over to others. It is reasonable to work harder when encountering such things, Carmen responded with a smile. What were the results? There's no clear-cut, corroborating intelligence. Carmen and Henna exchanged a glance. We've retrieved all the intelligence related to Great Britain held by the Chamber of Commerce since 1779. Since we haven't had time to investigate the details, we've only managed to find a few relevant points. First, during Sheikh Drake's blockade of the New World, he sank or captured over 160 smuggling ships, more than his two predecessors combined. This data should be relatively reliable, as we have the official annual throughput comparisons from the Baltimore Port Authority, excluding our smuggling volume. Baltimore's cargo throughput between 1779 and 1780 was 60% lower than the 4 years before the Revolutionary War. In other words, excluding us, Sheikh Drake virtually cut off the American smuggling lines. Second, Sheikh Drake emphasized military discipline. During his tenure, he continuously promoted rectification operations at the Royal Naval Dockyard, with leaks being a key focus. In contrast, even in 1780, when the manhunt for Edward Kenway officially began, the military intelligence Emmons provided us remained 100% accurate, without any omissions. Third, from 1779 to the present, we have had a total of 17 contacts with the Ministry of Commerce in the past 6 years. 4 of these negotiations were with the Minister of Commerce, 2 with the European branch, 1 with Africa, and 1 with me. I've reviewed all 17 memoranda. While there are few traps in the details, there are no threats or hints. Nor are there any clauses explicitly requiring us to make concessions. However, since the second half of last year, the Ministry of Commerce seems to have suddenly become more approachable. The latest 4 memoranda are clearly in our favor. It feels like the Ministry of Commerce wants something from us, but is unwilling to reveal a single word. Lorraine raised her eyebrows. They must have received instructions, right? Any intelligence? No. Ramos spent a lot of effort to find out, and Eddie also provided assistance, but we have no idea the reason for this change. But even if we don't know the reason, we have no reason to connect it with the smuggling of the Kenway merchant group. Carmen smoothed her hair back and began to speak freely. On the one hand, smuggling had been over for 4 years. If Great Britain wanted to profit, 1781 to 1783 was the perfect time to threaten. On the other hand, frequently showing goodwill while holding evidence defies basic logic. It's neither necessary nor meaningful. Necessity, meaning, timing. Lorraine walked into the room, muttering as he poured everyone a glass of wine. In other words, you're more inclined to believe what Bell said is true. There's no conclusive evidence, Carmen said, accepting the glass. But from what we've figured out, Sheikh Drake is biased toward us. Strictly speaking, that's enough to be considered a traitor. After all, his status is different from ours, as free merchants. And Great Britain's behavior is closer to ignorance. Otherwise, whether it's trial or blackmail, the most unlikely choice for a country when it has evidence is to give up its interests. Yes, there's a lack of conclusive evidence. Lorraine rubbed his brow and sighed. A voice suddenly said, "You can go confront your brother." Huh? Your brother? Sheikh Francis Drake. The voice was Henna. You know what I mean. If we go see him, everything will be clear. Lorraine's eyes widened, and it was hard to tell if it was surprise or something more complicated, or perhaps it was all mixed together, so mixed that the essence of the matter was no longer clear. How could I possibly go to him at this critical moment? Lorraine lost his composure, completely different from his usual self. Even if we put aside our past grudges, what would I say when we meet? Have you been helping me all this time? Am I being ungrateful? You can just ask Bale if he sent him. He'll tell you the truth, Hannah said coldly. Will he tell the truth? Lorraine said in a high voice. You haven't even met him formally, but I've met you, and I know you well. Hannah stared at Lorraine. Either sink Beljadia and Chris Emmons at sea, then track them down and kill them until you can't kill them anymore. Or else meet with Sheikh Drake and break things down. It's right here, and it's already messing with you. You can't do anything without resolving it. Forcing it will only hurt you and others. That's your duty, Hannah said. We'll be with you, but no one can do it for you. As always, Hannah harshly cut off all escape routes, leaving Lorraine with only 2 paths forward. One was to go left, condemn Bell to death, brazenly and blindly upholding a self-serving creed, and with irresponsible judgment, he was putting the future of the Chamber of Commerce on the line. If he won, he'd maintain the status quo. If he lost, he might even destroy his own team. The other was to go right, find Sheikh, uncover the truth, and learn the truth. The key is that truth the real truth? Lorraine actually knows it. Just like Hannah said, Lorraine knew that Sheikh would not lie to him. As long as he was willing to lower his head and ask, Sheikh would tell him everything clearly. He just didn't want to bow his head, and didn't want to admit that Shaq's shadow had always been behind his struggle and hatred over the years. This would hurt Helena, who had already gone to Oniton. At least Lorraine wishfully felt that this was a betrayal of the pain Helena had suffered. Betrayal, huh? Lorraine drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. Have you decided? Hannah asked, or maybe she didn't ask. Well, Lorraine let go of the glass, his eyes cold. Please ask Colonel Emmons to come over, I hope to see him immediately. Chapter 524, Rebirth. Zheng Anyue, Gamble of Fate. The room was bright, unusually bright. Candlesticks, candle holders, chandeliers. Hundreds of candles flickered in the faint night breeze, stacked layer upon layer, leaving nothing hidden. Emmons knew this wasn't Lorraine's study. While the Drake residence was indeed luxurious, the kind of luxury Carmen had mastered was always simple and restrained, with the slightest understanding of materials and craftsmanship, so that even the guest wouldn't notice the luxury. Lighting hundreds of candles for illumination? And in a private study, to meet a guest who wasn't even a guest? Such a lowbrow display of wealth wouldn't be tolerated by even the most foolish nouveau riche, let alone a top-tier tycoon like Lorraine, who had received the most orthodox aristocratic education and whose wealth rivaled that of a nation. Anything out of the ordinary is a sign of evil. Emmons suddenly realized something and sat down squarely across from Lorraine, his face solemn and focused. Tea? Or coffee? Lorraine asked the same question, sitting across from Emmons with her legs crossed. Even her tone was identical to the opening of the conversation that day. I saw a few bottles of 53 rum in your cellar. If that's okay, tea? Or coffee? Tea. Lorraine snapped her fingers, and Monica, dressed in a lady's tailcoat, entered. She took a single step and stood guard at the door. Sir, please, bring Colonel Emmons a cup of tea. Lorraine paused. By the way, does the Colonel have any preferences? I prefer sugar. The Colonel says he doesn't mind. Monica, thank you very much. Entertaining guests is the butler's job. Your Excellency is welcome. Monica lifted her skirt and saluted, taking a small step back. The door closed gently and slowly. Click. For the first time, Lorraine raised her eyes and met Emmons's. Colonel Chris Emmons, I heard you've been causing a lot of trouble for Shaq. Yes, Emmons said, more honest than when he'd first entered the room. I'm not good at handling my own affairs, so I occasionally leave some things unfinished, and the general often takes care of me. Unfinished? Do you mean being chased for dead or being buried alive? Both, but I was only buried alive that time. I've been kidnapped and threatened with amputation a few times to collect debts. Luckily, the general always showed up in time, otherwise I probably would have been forced to retire long ago. Such a wonderful experience, and you're only worried about retirement? Lorraine asked curiously. Would retirement be terrible? Emmons acted even stranger than Lorraine, not as if he was pretending. Without a mess hall and a dorm, I'd have no food or shelter. Without a monthly salary, I'd have no source of income. A disabled person with no other means of making a living would die of poverty, and I'd never be able to complete my research. Research? The odds of gambling. Lorraine recalled Emmons's defense in New Orleans a few years ago. Gambling has probabilities, and they can be calculated. I firmly believe this, and I'm willing to sacrifice my life to prove it. Admirable ambition. Lorraine complimented him mechanically. The tea arrived, a standard English blend, mellow but not strong, completely different from what Emmons had been craving. Lorraine slowly added fresh milk. Are you nervous? His question prompted Emmons to tear open the sugar packet, and the finely chopped sugar spilled everywhere. He sighed, clearing the mess before him, and replied softly, I'm looking for Assassin. I want to know where she is. Hannah probably went to see Belle. Theoretically, Belle could be on the run, maybe. Lorraine stirred his tea and smiled. It's probably not what you think. I rarely give Hannah orders. She's free. Where she wants to go and what she wants to do are all her own decisions. I'm only responsible for the consequences, so in the morning, yes. Whether she threw the knife or held a knife to your neck was her own decision. If she had judged you worthy of death, I would have thrown your body into your ship, along with those 16 sailors, and sunk in your Bermuda. Cold sweat immediately covered Emmons's back. He was confident that Lorraine would not kill him. The Drake brothers had a bond, and neither would sever it easily. But Hina Yesla, this woman was a mystery in all the information about the Drake Chamber of Commerce worldwide. No one could fathom her principles, which meant no one could predict her own actions, including her motives for murder. Emmons suddenly felt the reality of being killed, and the brightly lit study suddenly changed. a murderous intent threatening to burst forth. Shocked, horrified, surprised, bewildered, Emmons clumsily faced his fear, thinking, am I really that afraid of death? After years of facing danger, debt collection threats, he had always thought he was immune to the fear of death. But this time, the feeling was completely different. From the moment he slipped up, his heart had never truly calmed down. Why was this? He curiously reviewed the long day, replaying his experiences and emotions like a revolving lantern, and finally noticed a difference. The difference was obvious. Before this, all the murderous intentions he faced had been clear. Whether they were genuine attempts to kill him or threats of death, he knew it in advance, and he knew it clearly. If someone truly wanted to kill him, he couldn't escape. If someone didn't, he didn't need to flee. This was true in war, as well as in debt collection. Faced with a known future, he didn't need to harbor unnecessary fears. Or rather, he could easily convince himself to give up fear. But this time was different. First, his itinerary didn't include the threat of death. If all had gone smoothly, Lorraine would have had no reason to care about his life. This was a pure accident, without any prior warning. Furthermore, this accident involved the uncontrollable variable of Hina Yesra, making the entire outcome fraught with uncertainty and uncertainty. His fear wasn't death itself, but the uncertainty of whether he would die. It was like a gamble. Emmons grew unnaturally excited, sweating profusely, his heart pounding. Mr. President, what if? What if? Suppose that your judgment is different from assassins, and before she made up her mind about you, she had killed me, like this morning. What would you do? What would I do? Lorraine's face showed strange confusion. Is this a provocation? It's not a provocation. Emmons waved his hands hurriedly. It's not a provocation, it's just a reference, just like roulette, odds and evens, and cards, the history is always made public on the table. This is the reference left by the dealer to the gamblers. Only by providing a reference can we have the possibility of calculating the probability. Lorraine suddenly realized, it's gambling. Yes, Emmons panted, you are the dealer today. Assassin is the dealer, I bet my life. You have an obligation to provide me with a reference, otherwise you can only guess. Yes, Lorraine thought about it, and after thinking for a while, he suddenly laughed out loud. Although your words are very convincing, unfortunately, my reference is of no value to you. This is not a fair gambling table, it is fate. Fate is never fair. It only becomes a gamble when the stakes are high enough. Your life is insignificant. I mean, even if I didn't want to kill you at all, but Hannah killed you, it was just a trivial matter, not even worth discussing with us. Emmons' eyes suddenly turned red. No, Mr. President, the truth will come out sooner or later, no matter how well you hide it. The premise of this assumption is not to hide it. Lorraine interrupted him. If you die in front of Shaq, Hannah kills you, I will apologize, and then I will do what I should do. Nothing will change, nothing will change. This is your wait. The black tea was prepared. The aroma of milk and tea was fragrant. Lorraine picked it up and took a sip, then put down the cup with satisfaction. Okay, it's late. Please tell me, where's Shaq? Chapter 525, Rebirth. Shaq is back. The tea was fragrant, and the night was long. English tea was renowned for its moderate, mellow flavor. Even evening tea was never overly strong, a stark contrast to the strong teas favored in Scotland and Ireland. The ethereal aroma was intoxicating. Of course, that was just Lorraine's personal experience. Each tea from the British Isles possessed its own unique characteristics, each commanding immense loyalty and support. As long as the etiquette remained consistent, the type of tea consumed was irrelevant. The key was oppression. The bullying, the constant transmission of attitudes through subtle details, like a repetitive tape recorder, forced Emmons to confront reality and abandon his unrealistic fantasies. In other words, to sober him up and calm him down. Emmons had largely regained his composure, thanks to Lorraine and her wishes. After all, Lorraine's goal wasn't to extract a confession. When a person's mind remains unstable for a long time, they are more likely to reveal truths they would normally avoid, as well as fantasies they never imagined. And in these sensitive and suspicious times, fantasies can be destructive. Emmons took a deep breath. Mr. President, are you going to see the general? Maybe, maybe not. This is not your concern. Then do you think he is in the New World? Lorraine shook his head. I know he is still in the position of Deputy Chief of Staff. Although there are rumors of transfer, the official appointment has not been made. With the connections of the Drake Chamber of Commerce, we can't find out his next whereabouts. The transfer order has come down, Emin said. To be precise, the general's transfer order has completed all the procedures and will be officially issued in early March. He will return to the New World, and one of my tasks this time is to pave the way for him. Lorraine swept the rim of the glass and pondered for a moment. He will return to the New World, which means Sir Peter Parker's term of office is over, although it's not the same thing. Emmons nodded. General Parker's term of office has ended, and he will leave office around May. The Admiralty has taken a fancy to his friendship with the General in hopes that some adjustments will be carried out by the two of them to achieve a smooth transition. Adjustments, Emmons shrugged. The United States has become independent. To express our goodwill, Bermuda, the former base of the Continental Squadron, is no longer suitable to continue to assume such a major military role. The Royal Navy dockyard will be downgraded, and only a small defense formation will be retained. The Continental Squadron's anchorage has been moved from Bermuda to Newfoundland. Geographically, it is too far away from Jamaica and is no longer conducive to unified command. Although there were not many superiors and subordinates between the New World Fleet and the Continental Squadron originally, the Admiralty has officially separated them this time. The Admiralty is to form a brand new North American fleet, upgrade its level, and increase its organization. It will suppress the newly born United States while protecting the increasingly pressured Canadian coastline. The New World Fleet, which has reduced its defense zone, will be downsized to reduce the military expenditure pressure on Great Britain in the New World. This is the general idea. Emmons didn't care whether what he said would reveal military secrets. And there was no hesitation or consideration in his words. The new North American fleet is based on the former Continental Squadron's 2nd Division, comprising the first-class ship HMS Neptune, the third-class ships HMS Lion and HMS Mars, 4 frigates, 6 destroyers, and over 20 frigates of various types. The Lion will continue to serve as the Admiral's flagship. The Admiral will be promoted to Admiral of the Blue Banner during this transfer and become the first Admiral of the North American Fleet. My first mission in this trip to the New World is to consult with Sir Parker, establish the Admiral's office in advance, and welcome the Admiral in Newfoundland. It was unexpected. It had to be said that it was unexpected. Shaq was about to return to the New World, commanding a fleet of first-class battleships as a lone admiral. First-class battleships are the ultimate sea beasts that dominate the ocean's ecosystem, stretching 70 meters in length, with over 13 layers of armor, 108 to 112 guns, and a total displacement exceeding 3,000 tons. Even a formidable fleet like the Royal Navy possessed only 7 such ships, including HMS Victory, later hailed as a symbol of British supremacy and made famous by Nelson's Battle of Trafalgar. More importantly, first-class battleships were never commissioned without cause. Mostly, they were carefully stored in dry, state-of-the-art naval dockyards to preserve their timbers. Like nuclear bombs in later times, they were considered the foundation of a nation's military and a strategic asset. The only fleets in the Royal Navy to regularly deploy first-class ships were the Home Fleet and the Channel Fleet, with 2 ships in the Home Fleet and 1 in the Channel Fleet. Because they were responsible for protecting the British mainland, no matter how much they were valued, they would not attract the attention of other nations. But besides these 2 fleets, did any other British fleet employ first-class ships? None. The crown jewel of the New World Fleet was the second-class battleship Prince of Wales, and the African fleet stationed at Cape Town also considered these ships its most valuable assets. Asia. India seems to have 2 second-tier ships, while the Mediterranean Fleet, the second strongest force in the British Navy after the mainland, relies on a whopping 10 third-tier ships and 4 second-tier ships, with no first-tier ships in its roster. HMS Neptune, the Royal Navy's 4th first-tier ship in active service, what brought her to the peaceful New World? Is the situation in Canada truly so dire? Or, is Britain still obsessed with the bountiful 13 North American confines? Is this the clarion call for another all-out war? A shrill alarm blared in Lorraine's mind, then layer upon layer, its sound gradually muffled and weakened, until, finally, only a hint of questioning curiosity remained on his face. The Honorable Baron Tavistock has been promoted again. He is an admiral, a favorite of His Majesty. The Admiralty has even given him a precious first-class ship. Why does he want to stay on the tiny Lion? Is he reminiscing? No one can guess what the general is thinking. You know, he doesn't like to analyze himself in front of others. Emmons spread his hands helplessly. He really doesn't like to confide in people who are not related to him, but you are his close friend and his trusted advisor. I really don't know. The general didn't tell me anything, Emmons said regretfully. I guess you might be willing to tell you. You suggest that I meet with him? It's obvious that you are already prepared to meet with the general. As the general's loyal servant, I just do my best to provide some interesting topics for this long-awaited reunion. Some topics? Lorraine gave Emmons a deep look. It seems that you have successfully regained your intelligence, Mr. Colonel. Let's get to the point. Please tell me about your other mission. I mean the one that is related to me, which is important enough for you to bypass Kingston and Lord Parker and visit Miami secretly. P.S. Special part of the British naval rank. In 1297, King Edward I of England appointed William de Lindbergh as the Admiral of the Royal Navy of England. This is the earliest origin of the title of Admiral. After the 16th century, the Royal Navy added the positions of Rear Admiral and Vice Admiral. When on board a ship, the Admiral must stand at the bow, or in the center, to issue orders to the entire ship. The Vice Admiral served as his deputy, occupying the center when the Admiral stood at the bow, and vice versa. The Elizabethan fleet was large, divided into 3 squadrons. The Marshal led the squadron under a red ensign, the Vice Admiral's squadron under a white ensign, and the Rear Admiral's squadron under a blue ensign. As the squadrons expanded, each squadron was led by an admiral, including Vice Admirals and Rear Admirals, thus establishing a hierarchy of naval officers based on flags. This division continued into the end of the sailing era, forming the unique British flag color system, Rear Admiral. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.